Welcome back to AR's Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am AR Mirabal. I am joined by Jahmil Effend, poet and author of the upcoming High Kingdom series. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Man, this is gonna be awesome. Well, before we get into your latest work and like some of your poetry, I usually like to talk about uh writing in general. How did you get started with writing? Was it a thing that happened
So
from a young age or?
yeah, so my journey to writing was interesting. My brother and I, we actually started writing this novel over this summer. So before that, we used to love telling stories. Like that was a huge piece of our like childhood. We'd have the action figures, the WWE guys going at it. But we always told like super
Yeah,
complex stories with action figures. And
man.
yeah, it was like a whole thing. We used to call it the sagas, the whole
Did you
nine.
listen to the previous to like two episodes before this by any chance?
Yeah, I did. I listened to someone else who had a
The,
similar.
I said the same thing, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
I that's what I did. I played with toys as a kid, and I never thought I was gonna write either. Well, not I can't say either. I never thought I was gonna write, but when I think back on it, it was one of those things that like, oh man, I should have known because I loved it, and I
yeah,
used to
it's
have
like
deep
inevitable.
plots, deep and intense plots with my Batmans. Because I had like Batmans, that was my thing. Obviously, with the Batman mug, I'm still into it, right?
Yeah.
I used to have like a council of Batman. That used to be my thing.
Yeah, so we had Dragon Ball Z, WWE, all the action
Yeah,
figures, and we would tell these complex stories that would span weeks and months. Like right around now would be the time when the saga would be the craziest because we knew Christmas was coming, so we'd get more toys.
yeah. That's the initiation series. I
Yeah,
would have my mom would always complain that I would have my toys inside the tree, and I'd get mad if she moved them. I'm like, yo, they're collecting intel. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. They have them like staking out. We have this huge event right before that would be the reason why all the new people came.
Yeah.
It was such a huge thing. So after that, we both went to school. I finished up my master's degree last year,
Hey,
or,
congratulations.
back in May, and then I was like, I haven't really done anything writing wise. Like everything had taken a back seat to the academics. So over the summer, I started doing poetry. Started getting back into poetry and publishing some works. And as I did that, it kind of pushed me into that area where I wanted to write something more, like something bigger.
Yeah.
And we connected, my brother and I, and we were like, let's do the novel. He had done some novels in the past, but he never published them. So he had written a lot before, but he never had published anything. And I was like, let's do this and let's get it published. And that's what really sparked it.
Man, that's awesome. All right, well, since we're already kind of talking into it, could you talk a little bit about the series itself? How did you get the inspiration for the characters, the setting, the world?
Yeah, I got you. So it was actually really interesting. So when we started the series, we wanted to have a world that was a lot of it was Game of Thrones inspired. We love Game of
Yeah.
Thrones. And we were like, let's do Game of Thrones, but let's add more diversity. Let's add more diverse characters. And we wanted to see like what if Game of Thrones met like Wakanda and some of the other series that we really loved. And then we
So like
like
high tech type of?
not high tech in the way, but like the culture, like adding different cultural elements to every kingdom. So we were
Nice.
like, what if they had like all of that different culture all in one continent? So that sprung the world building piece where he had this idea for 10 or 11 kingdoms, and I was like, this is gonna be big. This is gonna be huge. And we
With all
started
their
going.
own collective histories and everything?
Oh, they're all of their histories. We actually
Nice.
we're gonna drop a video pretty soon on the histories of the world and the religion and how it was founded. But a lot of the story ended up getting based in religions.
Hmm.
So one of the things I always love in stories is the role religion plays in culture.
Yeah, me too.
And what ended up happening was we started discussing like how do you what's an interesting religion to have them follow, and that question led us down this rabbit hole where we ended up with a book. And the religion basically starts off with this high king. We said this high king Albion. There's one high king above all the rest. And event like we were like, what happens if he was so mythological? What happens if he had so many stories and tales written about him that it almost seemed like he was a god?
A god king.
Like a
the
god king, right?
Egyptian times.
Yeah, so
Pharaohs.
it's like, what if he had so many stories, but what if those stories weren't necessarily true? So we were like, one of the stories was like he came to a town that was suffering from a drought for 40 days, and on the 41st day when he visited, it rained. So then they tie the rain to him, right? Like the people tie the rain to him, and then
he's a rainmaker.
So then all of a sudden, what happens if there's another story they told? Like he fell into a volcano and came out unburnt.
Okay.
So they're like, okay, how did he come out unburnt? So we started talking about different things that could have happened and things that were maybe true, maybe not true, in the way that leads to the bigger religion of him saying that he talked to like Eros, who is our God version, Eros himself. And Eros, the God, gives him this edict basically saying all kings are gods, all queens are gods. And if you live as gods, then the world will have prosperity. And he brings this to the people. He's the high king. Everyone starts believing that they're all gods. And he ascends, he gives up the throne of the kingdom and lays this precedent that kings and queens will ascend to God. And we chose the age of 40. So they had plenty of time to live as gods. They didn't just like become gods later in life. They became gods at 40 years old. And then they decide and rule over a lot of the kingdom. This whole dialogue was really just built off of me and him on FaceTime talking about how can we make this series of events happen where they believe in him, and then all of a sudden all these kings and queens from 10 or 11 kingdoms start to become seen as gods, and what happens down the line if you create gods on earth. And that's really the High Council series, and it's itself is the world seeing this. Some of the other stories that got written into it, which isn't necessarily a spoiler. One of them is the Low King. We have a Low King who's a part of the story, and he was a god. He was a king that the gods didn't let ascend. So the gods have so much power that they get to choose who becomes a god alongside them. They didn't let him, and we were like, what would that do to the landscape of the world, right?
And his followers.
Yeah, his followers. And his followers started to worship him as a god separately from the rest of them. So we were like, okay, now we have this separate god, and he oversaw this area that was full of islands, and they became pirates, and they have this whole pirate culture that gets formed. And then we have the original people who are closer to where Eros was, and they still believe that Eros is the one true god, right? So they don't believe that the rest of these people are even gods. So then you have these three different factions that kind of have to live amongst each other, and that's the premise behind the world and how the world is formed. And then from there, you see which kingdoms fall into which territories, which kings and queens believe what, based off of how they're raised and how much the council influences them. And that's what the gods are the High Council in that series. So it was really intricate. It was a very intricate process of, I think we spent 4 or 5 hours just discussing the nuances of the religion. We talked about how one big thing for religion in any story is that not everyone should believe the religion the same way. Not everyone should know the same stories. Not everyone should have the same grasp. So
or could, right? Because there's no like phones or anything like that.
Yeah, so it's like if I tell a story of like Adam and Eve, I might say it in a very different way than someone else who could describe the very same story in Christianity. So we thought about how people would describe it in the story. If they had to tell the story of the High King meeting Eros, what would they say? What would be wrong? What would be right? And we play with that idea too, that not even the people who follow or worship the religion necessarily know everything about it. So that's the other piece. And there's a lot of muddy religious talk, and and our story is multiple character perspectives. And we follow 3 kings, and I can talk more about that too.
Oh no, please do. I'm blown away. I'm almost unpacking. All right, for just for a second, because I want to dive into like your thoughts on the whole religion aspect before we dive into the point of view things, because we've talked about that before, and I love that. And you know what? It's burrowing in my head. My first guest I ever had on here wrote African-based mythology fantasy series.
Mm.
So I just the fact that you're going on that tangent and then incorporating it with such a like deep lore, it's just, I mean, that in itself blew me away. And now this whole religious aspect, I mean, I'm hawking the series now. No, truly, genuinely. I mean, like you're hitting notes that I feel are not really tapped into as much as they should be in literature. You know, I feel like they're almost glazed over instead of being kind of emphasis as much as you're detailing now, which is, I mean, amazing. Religion is everything, right?
Yeah, it's such a huge piece of existence and culture in general. So we really thought about the the context, right? Like if you look at human history, so many cultures are founded under some form of religion, some form of worship towards some god of whatever. So we thought about doing the same thing, but not necessarily letting it slip away. It's not a background piece of the story. It's something that's in the forefront. It's how the characters really believe, and the kings that we follow. So we follow three kings in the story. Their entire world is based around the religion and ascending is what we call it. So the tagline of the series is kind of kings and queens no longer, or prince and princesses no longer, uh, they no longer aspire to be kings and queens. What they desire is something much bigger, a seat on the high council as a god, right? Like so you start from royal children from birth, growing up to wanting to become a god. So how does that change the dynamics? Another thing we did, which we like to take some things that are historically accurate and kind of muddy them a little bit. So one thing we decided was, what if the high council, what if the kings and queens don't necessarily decide their heirs based off of who came first, right? What if they get to select? What if they choose which one they believe is actually a god? So if I have two kids, a son and a daughter, and the son is older, he doesn't necessarily become the next heir to the kingdom. I can choose my daughter. And then the daughter would move to queen, and she would have the ability to ascend. So playing with that idea shifted everything in the story, because then you have this idea that like even the relationship between siblings changes, because it's no longer just the next person up or the firstborn child. It becomes like it could be either, and the parent can decide before they ascend. And we play with that idea too. So you see the characters as they deal with this concept that we created called imposter kings and imposter queens. Anyone who dies, any king or queen who dies, because it's not realistic to think that every king and queen will live to 40 and they'll all ascend. So any king or queen that died, we called them imposter kings and imposter queens, which meant that they were not gods at all. That the divine blood never touched them, which is why the parents will choose who they believe have divine blood. And that became a whole thing by itself, because now you have these characters worried all the time about being imposters, about the idea that they could die. And then you have other characters who believe that they are gods. So they believe they can't die. And you have that dichotomy of like, I cannot die because I am a god, or you might die because you're an imposter and that your parent or they selected the wrong child. So you deal with that, and that's an interesting dynamic also, because I think the psychology of what that would do to a person and how that kind of breaks you. It takes someone who already has a god complex and pushes them to this wild place, and it takes someone who already would question whether or not they are divine and make them think even harder. about if I was selected, am I a god? That question gets asked a ton. Am I a god? Is this real? Or what is Eros the true, the one true God? Is that the only God, or are we all gods? And if I'm raised in a place or a location that really believes that they're the high council are gods, then are they gods to me? And what does that do to my outlook on anyone else that thinks differently?
Now I have a question for you. Prior to this edict, or I can't remember the word that you used, that all kings after
Edict.
edict. Edict. I don't even know where I'm pulling these words from. The edict, the edict that all kings and queens after 40 become gods. Prior to that, there was it was monotheistic. I mean polytheistic. They only believed in Athos.
So they only believed in Eros before
Eros,
that,
I'm sorry.
or they only believed in what they could believe in. So most believed in Eros because Eros was something easy. Because you can point to the sun and see him.
Okay.
Um, but
So he's the
after,
sun god. He's like Ra.
yes, so
Okay.
after that, it became, oh, the kings and queens are. He gave them power over us, and the
Now you see,
peasants, they believe differently than obviously the royalty does.
that's where it's really interesting to me because I think society, like playing on the whole thing you were talking about, society and religion being so blended in together. I think society really changed heavily when we went from a monotheistic to a polytheistic religion.
Mm-hmm.
When we went from believing a council of gods, of Greek gods, almost like how you're putting it, with the divine three and then the nine under, totaling 12, which is a number that gets brought up throughout religion, uh, even Catholicism, right? Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit, and then the saints and angels under him, totaling 12 perfectly. I mean, it's just like a symmetry that happens almost all throughout religion. And then here comes, well, I can't say here comes, it was Christianity had been building up for a while, but then here comes Constantine and then just sets it. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
one God. And then what happens after Rome falls? A couple hundred
Yeah.
years after that, just like the world gets just reset under that idea of monotheism. It's so that is crazy how you're flipping the switch on it, where you're going from people believing in one God to now believing in many, and on top of that, these many are tangible.
Yes.
It's not just like tangible like you're seeing the sun. It's tangible as in like if you're living in the same area, feudal state as them, you can go and see them in the Plaza Square or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the big pieces for us. It was you're raised amongst them, right? You watch the king or queen rule for years, and then you see them ascend to becoming a god, right? Like you're used to them being in rulership. You're used to them being there as a presence, and then you celebrate when they ascend as if it's their birthday. And we were like, that is an interesting place to place all these kings, and they all ascend on their 40th birthdays. So it's just a number that they all try to reach desperately. And the other piece is being able to play with that number. What changes as a king or queen when you're ruling and you get closer to 40? How do you change? Like, do you continue to go to wars? Right? I doubt it, right? You don't want to be threatened on your throne. Do you get more timid? Do you become less of a voice in what happens around the continent? It's like more likely than not because you want to become a god. You don't want to become an imposter. You don't want to risk it at 39. So we get
Unless
to
you
play
really
with,
believe you're a god and you're
unless
like,
you
I'm not
really,
gonna die, I'm gonna conquer everything. What do you mean?
yes, unless you really believe you're a god. And then you get to see those characters and how they behave and how they've changed and how they move the world based off of that and how others respect them. So the religion piece plays such a large role in the overall narrative motives behind all the story. You see the Low King and his narrative, and we're on book one right now, but book two is it's already started, and we've had the series outlined, and we know where it's gonna head to.
Hell yeah.
And it's so interesting the turns you can take because the religion plays such a major role, because that age of 40 is such a big thing for people to hit. It's like people want to turn 21 so they can drink. well, these kings and queens want to turn 40 so they can be gods, and they fear not making it to that point. So you get to see what that fear can do, and what that ambition, if you believe you are a god, what that can do, because there are many imposter kings.
My God. Now you have painted a beautiful painting of what the series is. Could you take a magnifying glass and kind of point us through what book one is? You know what I
So
mean?
yeah, book one is about deception and lies.
Love it.
That is book one. It's
Wh-
deception and
What
lies.
is it called? How are you naming it? Is it volume one, part one? I myself, I never know what to do with it.
So we're calling it book one. We're calling it book one.
Book one. All right,
Book
cool.
one of the High Council series.
Does it
And
have like a pre-title, a subtitle?
it has a name. The title would be War in the Fallows. And the Fallows, we've broken up the territories into different titles. The Fallows is three kingdoms that historically became these three kingdoms because of a greater conflict that we actually outline in the video, because we gave a lot more of the background of how these places were formed.
The lore.
So yeah, the lore. So we have the book one. You're in the Fallows, and then the other perspective takes place in the Slip, in this area called the Breezelands, which is another king. So we have all of those little spots to play a factor. So that's book one, and it's all about the lies that you tell yourself and the lies other people tell you.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and it's people questioning themselves. I believe that people do question themselves often. So the characters question themselves. They question whether they're gods. They question whether they belong as kings and queens. They question the gods themselves. And then the lies that come with that, the lies you tell yourself and the lies others tell you, and how that can influence, for us, the greater story being told, and also the story at a micro level in book one.
Oof. So much to unpack. I mean, God, I just, it is such a breath of fresh air to hear everything that you're saying. I mean, I've just truly, I've never heard of this, you know? It's all things that I love pondering over and, thinking about, but I just really haven't seen it just put together in such a fantasy world as you're describing it. I cannot wait for it. Now, the point of views that you have as the three kings are the point of view of the three kings alone, right?
Yeah, so it's each king. They have their own chapters where you see through their worlds what is happening in the overall narrative. What's how this war in the Fallows takes place.
Now, how do you get into the point of view of a common citizen?
So you get the common view based off of how some of these kings interact with people,
Oh, the
and where they interact. So in a few different places, you see the kings as they go through their own areas and lands, and they run into the common folks. They can run into the regular people, and you see what the regular people believe and how they interact with the world, which is very much how you would expect regular people to behave. Where I think one of the characters at one point points out that, like, we're like a bunch of people in leadership roles kind of make all the decisions for everyone else, and all these people don't care. Like, they go about their day without any interruptions, and that's kind of how the world maneuvers a little bit. And I think we took some of that from our modern day life. If you look at how society would function without the news, the way it's currently set up, like, I went to the grocery store earlier, and that's all. I went to the grocery store after work. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about anything else. It was about me going to the grocery store and then coming home. And imagine if you didn't have all this news and all these other things feeding into you. It's like, yeah, there might be
Be a
someone
lot
ruling.
calmer.
It'd be a lot different. And like, the sailors are worried about the ships. They're not necessarily caring about the things going on with the kings. And we try to touch on that a little bit with the
Yeah.
story, just being like, there are a lot of people there's a small group of people who make all of these decisions that affect a large majority of folks. but they're not necessarily impacting people the way that they believe. It's like these people are impacted by the war, and recognizing the war is another piece. Recognizing the pain of the war, what happens, what it does to villages and people at that level. You get to see a few times how that really impacts the community at the community level, and then just seeing like at a bigger level, it's like most of these people are being represented by lords that they don't know. And some of the houses that we have, some of the lesser houses, they're just hilarious because they're literally just farmers who have a lot of land and some money that now can make decisions, because that's kind of how it worked.
Oh my God. So on top of all that, I'm detecting you're gonna put a nice little helping of comedic some type
Oh
of
yeah.
oh hell
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Hell
There's,
yeah. That
there's
is
plenty of
lacking.
comedy.
That is lacking in fantasy direly, man. Hell yeah.
Plenty of comedy. The other piece that we really liked was that's for one of the character perspectives, they have a sister, they have a family, and we made them really just like a family, not necessarily like a royal, like what your thought of a royal family would be. They're more like just like a family
Yeah.
that happens to be royal. Like they remind me of like the Obamas. Like they're just like, yeah, they became this, but they're not necessarily acting like that around each other.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of dialogue manipulation. So when characters are in different settings, we had them speak differently. Because it's very, in my opinion, it's just something very important. It's a little nuance that you can do in writing. Is if you're around your family, you speak differently. You speak more relaxed or more casually. Like, so you might do that as a king or queen, or a sister or whatever. And we do that in the story. And then if you're around your court and you're making decisions, you might be a little bit more stern. Or if you're around the people and you want to show off this image, you might behave or speak a little differently. So we try to do that as well. We have that happen in one character perspective pretty often because it's really easy to put in. And then we also have a king that is very much different than your normal king, based off of his circumstance. And his circumstance kind of it's kind of influenced by other people in his life that continue to be a part of the kingdom that should not be anymore.
My God. And I love like what you were talking about with the dialogue flips. I love that. It's actually one thing that I try to do in my own writing. And just an example they brought up immediately is at the very end, I think of like I think 20 like chapter 25. It ends with a scene that the characters are in a situation where they need to use a vehicle, but none of them can drive. So then one of them pops up and goes like, "Oh, what you mean? Toss the keys over here." And it lands in his hand like perfectly. And he goes like, "I just got my keys yesterday." And then it cuts to the first scene in the next chapter, and he's driving, and it's going crazy. They're about to die every 3 seconds, and they're yelling at him. But like, "Oh, I thought you could drive." He goes like, "Yeah, I just got my keys yesterday. What you mean?" So it's just like the exact same sentence, but it's just a different scenario. Just makes it completely different. And on top of that, it changes point of views from like the character like feeling himself and being like, "Oh yeah, I got that," to like being a person looking at him being like, "Oh, this dude's, where is he? All over the place." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the best. That's the best stuff. Like for us, we really enjoyed the multi POV. You get to look at a bunch of different kingdoms, which is one of the real reasons why we did it. We wanted people to be able to see what was the real differences in all the areas, and you get to. I think you explore 7 of the kingdoms. I think we have 11 or 12. So there's still more left to explore in other books. And yeah, you get to experience the other worlds through other people's eyes, and then you also get to see how other kings and queens look at the religion and what they believe and what they think. And that was some of the most fun stuff to write, because every character is so different in their beliefs and how they approach the gods. And some people have their own rituals based off of where they are, because obviously they existed before the gods did, the kingdoms existed. So there's some things that they kept. There's some things that didn't necessarily go away just based off of their older religions. And they repurpose them and all that stuff. So there's a lot of little things. There's a champion king who's a part of the story. We have this idea that you can be every king and queen. They have a tournament of champions that takes place. So when you ascend, you leave obviously your heir to become king or queen. That person needs a champion. That person needs someone to protect them. They need this guard, and they have a tournament for the best champions. So they get all the fighters across the land come together, and we get to see the tournament of champions in book 1, which is just the awesome. Like it was an awesome couple chapters to write because it was so much fun. But you get the tournament of champions. We had this really interesting tournament style. Like it ended in a triple threat. Like I don't, just the WWE we couldn't go away. We had a Royal Rumble and a triple threat at the very end, and it was so much fun to like kind of coordinate. The Royal Rumble was like this battle down to 20, and then you like kind of carve the group down.
Oh man, I love how that like, you wrote it together with another person. It must have been so much fun to actually get in there. And man, I have to tell you, I love your train of thinking, and I love your writing process, because I think something that kind of gets lost in a person when they start going into a fantasy series is that when they start developing one, is that they get so serious about their world that they don't like step back and realize how funny it is. You know what I mean? And I think you're just nailing that. That's something that it is evident in the best writing to me. When the writer is able to step back and realize the actual comedy of their environment, even though it is serious, and even though the environment and the stakes are serious, you have to be able to step back and realize, no, this is a pretty funny situation. You know what I mean? Not every king that has a crazy high status needs to act properly and be in that way. It could just happen out of numbers. You know what I mean?
It's in the fun part for us, I think like the Tournament of Champions is like a prime example.
Yeah.
So we had it starts off with this very Royal Rumble like circumstance. I love WWE, so I just had to incorporate some type of WWE into it.
Is there an awesome announcer in there too?
Oh, absolutely. You best believe we had an announcer announce all these people's names, and it was hilarious.
Now there's no technology, right? So they're in an amphitheater.
No, yeah. So they just start screaming it.
So, yeah, hell yeah.
so we had the Royal Rumble come, and that happens. And then we have it go from a Royal Rumble to these tag team matches. And it's like 3-on-3 tag team matches.
With weapons, or is it just
blunted weapons? Blunted weapons, so they couldn't kill each other. With all and the scene that
damage with the butter knife.
Yeah, the scene we tried to set was all these guards hanging around and like they all running as soon as something gets too serious.
Oh hell yeah!
And then
it's from the point of view of the king, so they're watching it. No.
Yes, and it's from the point of view of the king, and he's watching. So you're just like, what is going on? Like it just gets crazy. So we have those, and we're in the fun part about that scene, that chapter in particular, is that, without spoiling anything, there's just a lot of people that come to talk to the king while they're watching the tournament. Because just like any sport or anything, there's going to be people who just talk on the side. Like they're just having a conversation. Not everyone's watching. So people are just coming up, visiting and talking to the king. And there's some of the best dialogue because you're meeting new characters, and this whole thing is going on at his champions tournament. And one of these people will be his champion by the end. So it's a huge title. There's only 11 champions in all of the lands. So it's just this big deal. And we have that, and that was just a really fun place to write. We had the one-on-one, we ended with the triple threat. We had the tag teams. We had the Royal Rumble. It was like a really fun way to do a medieval style tournament without doing jousting and all that stuff. We wanted something more like just more brutal. Just reminds me of WWE. So
you oh my god, you're singing all my songs right now. if I was a Netflix executive, I'd be fucking like, my hands would be trembling right now. I'd be like, Jesus Christ, get him, hurry.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It was a lot of fun because I think the co-writing piece was fun because we always had someone to bounce ideas off of. And I think that was the best part about the writing process.
That's the hardest part when you're alone because you're in a vacuum.
Yeah, you get someone else to just talk to, and we were consistently able to just call each other, send a chapter, because we wrote different characters. So part of how we did it, I wrote two of the character perspectives. He wrote one of them, and partly for character voice, so that they all sounded very different because you have different authors. But the other piece was we wanted to be able to give very different kingdoms. Like we gave each other kind of outlines of what those kingdoms look like. We knew how much money those kingdoms had, which doesn't even come up in the book, but it was just nice to know. We knew the size, we knew what their populations were. We did a lot of research on the back end beforehand, before we started writing, just in the world building piece, so that we knew so much about the actual kingdom that by the time we got to the book, it was just that much easier. And it made a huge difference because he wrote this really interesting world of this kingdom that really doesn't know how to rule necessarily. Like, they don't have a good grasp of diplomacy. They're, in the best way to describe them, they're like the stereotypical Viking, right? They don't have this government formed very well. But it's so interesting because it's a contrast to the other two kingdoms that kind of have a diplomacy because they've stood for longer, but still have this air of, like, one is a war torn nation. They're so used to fighting because they're in the middle of the map. And when we looked at it, we're like, they're in the middle of the map. They have to be the one that goes to war the most. Like, no matter where you're going, the war has to go through them. And that was a big piece. And for us, a lot of the conflicts that get created came from the map itself. We looked at geographically where allies would form, and then where would you see conflict based off of what was there. And that's how we even started the first book's narrative.
Oh my god. You just you just you really attacked the story from such a good angle. There's nothing I can even like think even just, you know, in my own head thinking to myself, there's nothing that I would even kind of like jam like, my god, it's just. So how many chapters are there in total? What did you end up writing for the first book? What is the length?
There's 21 chapters in
Nice.
the first book. Um, we we were able to give each character, one character has 9 chapters. One of them have 5, and the other has, I believe, 8. Actually, there's 22 chapters. Now I think about it. And that was, we settled on that number because we we didn't want to write so much more because we knew book 2 was gonna come.
Mm.
So we're like, book two story arc. I can't even go. If I even went into book 2 story arc, it's so interesting to even think about because of where it picks up and where all the players are on the board at the end of book 1. And that's gonna be an interesting take medieval on the medieval world with uh a very like 21st century problem
Oh my god.
or 20th century problem. It's
Trying to
a
make sure I never get into the fucking medieval genre. I'm gonna leave that to you, bro.
yeah, it's a
You got
medieval
it.
it's a very very interesting, like, book 2 has a very interesting plot line. And the selling points are going to be very interesting on book 2. But book 1 has a lot of lies, a lot of deception, and then the ending. That was fun to write. The ending was fun to write.
All right, just cause I feel we're delving into the spoiler territory, let's dial back a little bit into the actual production. How did the editing go? Are you at the phase that you've gone into the cover art yet? Have you been talking to, where are you at?
So we went through the editing phase.
Cool.
We finished that up
Did
last
he go
month.
through a company and agency, or did he go through a personal
We went,
Fiverr type of person?
went through a freelance editor. She was awesome. She graduated with her master's degree, and she went through and gave us a ton of feedback.
Hell yeah.
Like, the amount of stuff that she was very nice and kind about it, but there were things that she just wanted to change. There were things that she thought, either timelines and those kind of deals, that she wanted to see cleaned up, and all of her edits were so helpful in making the story that much cleaner. because like I always think is the first draft of your novel is you telling the story to yourself.
Very
So
good.
you have a lot of filler, a lot of things that you're just trying to explain out that don't necessarily need to be explained. And she was able to help us really condense and clean up a lot of it. Right now, we're on the beta reader phase, and we have our betas reading a bunch of, I think most of them are almost halfway through the book right now, giving great feedback. We actually have a historian who got his degree in history and worked at a museum giving us feedback on all the medieval things. And he's going like page by page. Anytime he sees something that we should make a different word or give a different phrase to, we have a perfect person that knows his stuff on medieval times, and he's been super helpful. And then a lot of our other beta readers are just very avid book readers. So we have some people who really know their stuff, and they've been able to give us small tweaks and great impressions on our characters. And a lot of them have loved a couple characters who I knew they'd love based off of just the way in which those characters are written. One
Yeah.
character doesn't get introduced to like chapter 4, but they come in hot. And when, when that character hits, that is a lot of people's most hated and loved character, because you hate them, but you love to read how they see the world. I wrote them from the lens of a pessimist. They look at the world in a very pessimistic way, and it makes sense based off of their backstory as you get that more and more, and it makes sense based off of the way they get treated by other people. And then they're just a pessimist. It's a pessimistic king. So you can only imagine the kind of power you could have as a pessimistic king and hating the world, but at the same time uh, being in charge. It's just
Oh my God. That it brings me it makes me think I wrote a 20-year gap in one of my stories, and one of the chapters starts off and the character being young and waking up on his birthday, and he's happy about his birthday. So the first line is, "I love today." There's basically, there's nothing better than today, blah, blah, blah. If I could make today longer by even a second, I would. And then it skips to him being, 20 years later, and he's a pessimist now, and he has all this crazy amount of power. So he wakes up, well, on his birthday, same thing, just 20 years later, and he's like, I hate today. If I could make today any shorter or just outright get rid of it, I would. But now he has power, so he's like talking about it, because like, hey, you know what even is a day? I can do that. I can get rid of a day. And he's just like, just like going through the motions now. And then like he hears like a knocking on the door, and he's getting annoyed by this thing, and it's just like, to me, it's kind of what you're talking about with like the rulers, is that like you don't get like the comedy of it, is that he is like almost Obama loved as in the position that he's in, but the way he's introduced, you think he's a tyrant. But no, he's an elected official with like 85% approval rating, and he's not president of a sector. He's basically world president. 85% approval rating, unheard of.
Yeah, and those are the best characters to write.
But then you meet him, like you're one of his clientele, and he's ripping your head off over nothing. Yeah, like it was like, oh, what's your name? Let's go, come on. Just his entire thing is just a completely different outlook, and I love writing those characters, and I love hearing that. Like, it's making me bug out. I gotta be in this beta reading. I'm serious. Put me in that. I would love to read it.
I got you for sure, because it has been so much fun. You have all of these interesting characters who have these different backgrounds, and they're in different kingdoms. They're all kings in kingdoms, but they're so different that it just makes it very much a story that's just always giving you something more. And I think a lot of the beta readers, I had at one of the questions I give them is, what do you think is going to happen next? And a bunch of them are just like, I don't know, but I'm excited to see, because they just can't tell. Like when you get a new chapter, it's another perspective. You can only imagine what's gonna happen in the next chapter. Like, how's this one gonna read? Who's gonna attack who? Who's gonna die? Is someone gonna get a sword? Like, you never know what's going on. And it's a lot of, we tried to make every chapter its own, how we like to write, at least, is we like to make every chapter like a TV show. We always think of it
Hell
like,
yeah, me
if
too.
this is an episode of a show,
Yeah.
what would this episode be about? And that's kind of how we write.
With an own tone and like different
Mhm.
setting. You got to hit the chapter hard. That was the first. That was like the
Yes.
main thing I always thought was like really difficult when it came to writing. Well, not difficult, but it's just one of those things that like it's almost like I guess the writer's block of like the first chapter when you're like you go to write it and then at first it's like, oh wait a minute, I got to go way harder than that.
It's like this can't be how it starts.
Yeah, it's like, oh wait a minute, let me dial back. Like, where can I start this to make it way cooler?
Yeah,
But
one of
then
my
still continue still progress the story and how I need to progress it. You know what I mean?
yeah, one of my starts is one of my big things is always starting in action. I always start chapters either right approaching action or right when something's going on. I like to start conversations right where it gets interesting. Not always the hi hellos, but sometimes it's like, all right, they're in the middle of talking about something, and you're jumped in at the right point where you can kind of pick up on the dialogue.
Yeah, it's
Um,
cool. I like that.
but we also do have a cover. The cover is completed. Um, we're getting ready to do the cover reveal stuff. I actually have the first proof copies right now. I haven't opened them yet, so I'm excited. They're literally sitting on my couch, and I'm waiting to open them.
Oh,
A little.
unveil it for the people. You got
Oh,
to.
which I know. So I gotta get those and look at the proof copies. But the cover is done. Worked with a really good graphic design artist. He's done. He
What type
actually
of
did it.
art?
So he's done a lot of Photoshop and interesting things. He did a cut. He does so much stuff. So I've seen him do credit cards. He's created like legit bank debit cards. Like he's that kind of person. He's also designed. He designed the cover art for one of the songs on NBA 2K. Like his cover art was that artist cover. Like that was crazy for one of the songs.
Oh my god.
And I've seen him do a ton of art. I actually worked with him at college, at Eastern Connecticut State University, and he's dope. So I was able to connect with him, worked with him, and we're still actually we're gonna see how this cover looks on the book, and then go back and do a little bit more cleaning up. So we have that getting ready to fully release that pretty soon. So I'm excited about that. The cover is dope. Like,
Man, I'm literally with you. I had a cover for the book I had, but then I doubled back on it because again, it was that feeling of like, you know what, it's just not hard enough. So I'm gonna double back. I'm gonna keep the graphics, use it for like merch and whatnot. And I have two cover arts being made because I'll probably release like a special edition in a year after
yeah,
with like updated graphics and things like that and a hardcover. And I have one being made of a pixel art. Like pixel art, like a like 16-bit.
yeah,
Cannot, and the guy that's doing it is absolutely just nasty. I cannot wait to see that. Like nasty, right? And then the
yeah.
other guy does posters for Marvel.
Oof.
I like, yeah, and I literally when I contacted him, it was just like, that's like when you see like a model at a bar and you're like, all right, whatever. I'll throw it, whatever. She's probably gonna say no, but I might as well. She's right there,
Shoot
It
your
was the
shot,
same.
right?
I might as well shoot my shot. I'm right here. I'm at 4 shots. Let's make it 7. Then I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go over there. I'm gonna shoot my shot. And I did the same thing with like the artist, and he told me the figure, and I was like, LOL. And I was like, yeah, we can't do that. But I was just honest. I was like, yeah, for as much as I would want to, I'm not at the financial like state to do that. For my second book, I definitely want, like, I definitely want to keep in contact. And he was like, oh, you know what? Let me like check my schedule and I'll hit you back on Tuesday. On Monday, he hits me back up and he goes like, yeah, I'll do it for the low and I'll give you a full graphic, not just a
Mm,
thing. Like I respect the idea and I get the hustle and I'm just like, yo,
that's where it's at.
yo. Yeah, that guy, Verdishki graphics. Look at this man up. I mean, he insano. He really does work for Marvel. Like it's that real. Uh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I think that.
don't you get amped? Don't you? Isn't that like the best part of like
Oh,
being an author? Like, it's just like I do engineering, and I'm sure like everyone has has done group project when you go and you contribute to something, and everybody and a lot of people work in industries where they go and they contribute to a grander purpose, like, oh, we're selling whatever and I do the sales, he does accounting, whatever the heck. We have full control over our shit.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote my copyright page. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yes.
I wrote my copyright page. I wrote, I own this. This is the email to contact me if you want to use it. What's up? You know what I mean? You're gonna do that every, like, what other industry can you say? I guess music, but even then, that's a little harder. Unless you're a
Mhm.
Jay-Z producing your songs and doing but even then, he wasn't sound engineering. You know what I mean? We do all that, man. Isn't that like such an amazing feeling to like really like when everything is said and done and you're holding that hardcover or the paperback and you post the Instagram picture. Can you imagine the cheese? I'm almost scared to post it because my smile is gonna look like this. I'm gonna look like the Joker. You know what I mean?
I feel that, yo. It's because like there's something so special about like being an author, right? You're writing this huge book. You're
That
writing a
take
novel.
it takes so much out of you. It's literally, it feels like your
Yes.
fingers. You know what I mean?
Yes. It's like every single word it feel for me, especially like I went back and I've done the majority of the editing because I just have time and I like doing it. So I've done,
3 hours on one word,
oh
just
man,
staring at it.
just trying to figure out what should I say?
It
How to
just
make this
doesn't.
sound
It's
better?
not right.
It's like
And then four
deleting
hours later,
sentences.
you somehow talk yourself into it. It's like, oh, actually, no, that actually was good. Huh, okay, move on.
Yeah, it's like read this real quick. So we've been it just
Oh my
you
god,
get to have
I
so
get
much
that tatted.
control.
Can you read this real quick?
Facts. Facts. Yeah, you get so much control. It is awesome, especially the cover and working with the graphic design artists on that, the marketing. So we're doing the self-publishing route, and it is super nice. You get to create your own platforms and do all of these little things that really get to elevate the story itself. We made this whole video and with all the lore and literally got the map made. I got the map printed right now in the book. I'm like hyped about that. Like it's across 2 pages. Like it's the whole map. Like we really got the whole thing here. So
Guy, I'm loving your approach. I'm loving how you're thinking about this. I feel like a lot of people take it like because we're not agented and we're not being like a publish house, like it's almost diminished. I take it as a boon. We're in a place that if you want to take it, if you want to really think about it like an entrepreneurship, this is the area, this is the time, you
mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah, this is so my thought on it is like, right, this is the best opportunity you can have to really own something and maximize it. I've seen a
Yeah.
lot of people talk about like I'm in all the Facebook groups, I'm in all the fantasy groups and all the help groups and all that stuff. And I've appreciated a lot of the advice you get, but I know that I've noticed, right, that there's a lot of people who either don't see the ambition behind what they have to do to make their book successful.
Yep.
Like you got to get out there. You have to
I
market.
see it.
You got to
I see
market,
it.
right? You have to get out there. You might have to pay for ads on Amazon. You might have to do something to get more hype. For me, it was creating a podcast, right? I started the Books by Authors podcast so that I was able to connect with more authors and get more people to either teach and learn how to write, like people to do book, like who do books, to
Yeah.
talk about books, who are part of the industry, talking about the industry. And I think that was just a part of like the greater plan, right? It's like I'm going to publish my book and I want to be able to connect with everyone. I want to be able to have a voice in the platform. I want to be able to have an Instagram that's slowly growing, but it's growing like every day. You know, you got to keep following folks. Like,
Yeah, me
like
too,
you
bro.
got to do it.
It's
Like
unreal.
it's the grind, but you want to get your book out there. You want people to see it, and then when the pre-sales come and all that stuff, putting yourself in the best position possible to maximize your sales in the short term and long term. So that's kind of how we've approached it. My brother and I is really just looking at it as a business. Right now is the business side where we're not necessarily doing all the writing. We're starting book 2, but you got to market, you got to do the cover, you got to get the beta reader feedback, and we got to work on book 1. My brother right now, he's actually working on the prologue that we're going to give out to people who sign up for the newsletter and people who pre-order the book. So if you pre-order the book, we're going to give out a prologue which is one of the character perspectives about what happened before you get introduced to them in the book. And that prologue is going to be dope because it's a story that we were super interested in telling, but it just didn't make sense in the grand narrative. So we were like, we really can't talk about it much. Like it's just going to be mentioned. So it's how one of the kings becomes a champion king. It's this whole story about how you become a champion king, which I think is going to be mad interesting for anyone that reads it. So we have that going on, and it's constantly just figuring out how do you make this a business on the business end, even more so than just the writing, because the writing is the fun part. Like everyone loves writing. Like it's so that's the best part of the whole thing. World building and storytelling. That's what it's literally all about. But it's the business side where people either slack or people don't like as much. But I don't know. I feel like that's the important part.
Where can people find the podcast?
So the podcast is up on Spotify, it's up on Apple Podcasts, it's books by authors, super easy. You just type it in and you'll see the Books by Authors podcast. And I'm the host right now. I think we're at seven episodes. It comes out every Friday. So you can always tune in. The episodes are always interesting. We got people from England, from Australia, from the Philippines. I've interviewed people from Florida, Texas, Washington, California. I interviewed a pretty dope, a really dope author, or two, actually a few dope authors. One was Sky Horn. She's amazing. I'm reading her book right now, Wings of Fate. It's amazing. My wife loves it also. She taught me so much over our conversation, and I'm glad we were able to record it because she was dropping straight knowledge in there.
I love those episodes. Sean Campbell and Steve Arganes. My God, those episodes are hard on like the that I recorded.
The other one was SD Howard. He dropped so much. He just came out. His book just released last week. This guy is so smart. Like as far as the industry, as far as marketing, he was able to. He talks about literally like the reason why I feel so strongly even about marketing now is from talking to him. It's like the business side of it is so important. It's putting yourself out there and connecting with folks. Like what you're doing right now, it helps the brand, it helps the book, it helps stories, helps future stories, helps so much because it's like I'm connected. I'm tuned in now. Like I'm always gonna be a fan.
No, I mean, there is nothing that I love more of this than that connection part. The Sean Campbell has been a writer, a published writer for 20 years. Every single author that I've talked to is in my situation. Well, not every single one. I would say about 70% of them more is in my situation. They have a day job. We gotta, like, oh, what's your scheduling like? Oh, you gotta cook dinner at this time. Oh, blah, all those things. Him, I literally had to like take some time off work. Like I had, well, not really. Like my schedule is pretty flexible, so I basically had to work 2 hours more throughout the week so I could take 2 hours off in the morning on the day of the podcast. Because one, he was in England, but two, he works on the weekends because he's the writer. So like that's when he's working. His office hours that he's accepting work is the weekdays 8 to 11. That's how he's living, bro. He's a real legit author. This man, he started writing at the start of Kindle. Each book that he has 9 of them, has about 1,500 reviews on it. 5-star. This man, it's unreal. He was breaking it down to me on a mathematical level. The marketing, the revenue streams, how he was even breaking it to me, which is something that like I never thought that somebody on the podcast would tell me about. He was telling me how it is to have a bestseller. He was telling you how the numbers look like. He was telling me that like when you have a bestseller, it starts off as a couple hundred a day, then a couple thousand a day. And it just even he glazed over that. I was like, wait a minute.
Is that a couple hundred?
I'm over here geeking. If I sold 20 a day, I'd be geeking,
yes.
Right? Geeking, right? This dude was talking about like, oh yeah, it starts off at 100 a day, and then a couple thousand a day, and then when you hit like a height. Mine, like like what he said was 10,000, and then from there it starts dropping off. And then he was talking about, yeah, exactly, 10,000 a day. Where are you, bro?
And then it
What are you
starts dropping.
talking about? 10,000 a day? And then he went down, and then he was like even breaking it down further. He was talking about that he wished that he had staggered his releases more, because knowing that own graph, if he would have released the book 2 right after it, then that graph would have picked up and both would have soared,
Yep.
because release of a book 2 increases the sales of book 1.
Book 1, yep.
And he was just like just running on the numbers out. I'm telling you, I think that he talked for 80% of the podcast, because I felt like I was a kid in the corner. I could have had a lollipop. Like, oh, okay. Oh, what about that? All right. Like, what about this, mister?
Dropping nothing but knowledge.
Yeah, I'm telling. Oh my god, it was just unreal. And I wouldn't have done that if I didn't decide, hey, what if I just like talk to some like people about writing as much as I want to write? And the only reason that came up is because, just as you said, I got so like annoyed of like talking to my friends and being like, hey, could you read this? And them getting annoyed of being like, yo, fuck, all right, you know what I mean? That it was just like, all right, there has to be a better solution for this, right? The same way that comedians are like funny and have like mental issues and then go on stage to basically vent out those mental issues. It's like, all right, how can I talk to people about the shit I want to be talking about? Authors like talking about reading and writing, right? So that it was just like, that was it. That was the genuine, like, just like just wanting to talk about writing for long periods of time with people that actually want to talk to about writing for long periods of time,
Yeah, it was one of those things, right? Like when I thought about the podcast, I thought about how do you connect with folks? How do you connect with people who enjoy the same thing?
Yeah.
So I found myself constantly trying to find other people like my brother and I who love writing, who just love like for me, I love the world
like a
building.
sport.
I love world building, right? Like I
Yeah.
love that. Like that's my thing. Like if we could just talk world building for 2-3 hours, I would do that all the time.
Oh my God, can I give you something real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a planet called Gamul, right? Now, like I was thinking about this the entire time we were doing, because like to me it is so funny too. So Gamul, so the whole government, when they were children, had this like it was basically kind of like a big brother type of thing, where they had it installed in people that the world was flat. There were only 3 sectors, even though there were 7, with the idea that like they told people that the sky was just basically like a backdrop, and not to worry about it, and just keep your head focused on the thing. So they had like a derogatory term for the people called a strainer, because if you strained your neck looking at the sky, you were basically an idiot. It's like, why are you focusing on the sky? Focus on what's ahead of you, right? So when the whole regime got taken over, and then like they started putting everything together and like realizing all the lies, they realized that one of the things is that not only is there, are they on a planet that exists in a solar system, but there are actually there are other inhabited planets in that solar system, and they try to made contact with us, but we've ignored it. So now that these people have the power, they're like, oh, we're gonna recontact these people and see what's up. One of these people are the people from Gamul, and Gamul was this planet that prior, like way before to the series of Allegory of the End, they were a bustin'. Like they were like the center of the solar system. They were busting. They were crazy because they had discovered this essence on this mineral, but it's not even just a mineral. It has this crazy property that's called mana. They called it mana, and it's a mineral naturally regrowing on their planet. It has crazy electromagnetic properties, crazy energy potential. I mean, it's like helium-3 on a 20 billion. It's like helium-3 if you took that with like non-radioactive plutonium and mixed together with like like high-end mercury. It was like the craziest thing ever. It was just like the god particle, and that thing was so crazy that the planet literally destroyed itself with one another. You know what I mean? They literally, like, nuclear winter killed everything living, and then as the planet reset and like life started to come about, the sentient monkeys, basically, which are the inhabitants of Gamul now, started to come about. But one of the things that in like this recreated planet is that heavy amounts of nitrous dioxide was released into the atmosphere. So at lower valleys, you're literally high at all times, even if you don't want to be. So the people are dumb. Not only are like monkeys, but their evolution is basically digressed because they're high all the time.
Mm.
But then a small sect of them eventually realized that if you went higher up in the mountains, that the gas, that it wasn't as like evident, and they could, start rebuilding society. So it's kind of like this thing. It became this hierarchy of like almost like parents to children, because you have like the scientific like people living in the mountains that like understand like, all right, if we build up like filters and filter out the air, we can get people all together. But then you have people just like just dumb as shit and don't know anything and don't want to do anything, but they're just like they know nothing, they know nothing
That's
else,
awesome.
they just want to hang out. And then so when they make communication with Zako, that's basically their main plea. It's like, hey, listen, we could rebuild our society basically, but we just need the manpower to build these fucking filters, because obviously we have no manpower over here. Everybody's just, doing whatever. And on top of that is that like I made that planet as easy as possible. Like all the shelters just happen almost like innately. Like there's like trees that literally you walk into and they're just like naturally growing perfect shelters. Like the food is just like perfectly picks up and you can just eat it. There's almost no predators. It's just the easiest planet ever. That's why they don't want to do anything, because it's just like, why change? It's
Yeah,
perfect. You
why
know what I
leave,
mean?
right?
It's perfect. Why mess around? And the people over there is like, oh no, but we can, all these things. So what they do is that in the time that it takes them to travel to this planet from Niamber, where the main characters are, to Gamul, they send them a dictionary. Well, they mean to send them a dictionary so that they could, get caught up on their language and be able to communicate by the time they get over there. But by the time they get over there, they realize that whoever was in charge of sending that over to them didn't send them a dictionary. They sent them a diction on dairy. So by
Oh.
the time they get there, they have this idea that humans only fuck with ice cream. So the moment they get there, they're like, human ice cream. And every place that they go to, because you know how like when you go to a place that like you set up like a tourist thing and like like make it like for them and all that,
Yeah.
like every stand that they go to go visit, it has ice cream stands. And they're like, oh, here you go, you're human, you like ice cream. And that's all they know. Is that they can't even really communicate properly. All they know is like the introduction, their planet name, and ice cream. But then still they have to have this communication, because the main characters want that mana. They don't even know what they're holding. Know what I mean? All they're thinking is about like these ale filters and trying to get people like to not be so lazy. They're not even paying attention to the mana. They're like, oh yeah, there's this blue stuff over here, we'll give you all this. Okay, whatever, we'll help you out.
That's dope. Yo, that's cool because one, the entire world is built off of this this huge inciting incident that took place that then
That's serious.
yeah,
Real serious.
it's super serious, that then ultimately changes the literal dynamics of how that planet operates and how the inhabitants behave.
Yeah,
And
it was Olympus. So it
yeah,
was the center. It was the diamond of that solar system, and then just became like in a second a pebble.
yeah, and then you have then like even the idea that like, oh, they figure out, right, that going higher and getting higher elevation is the solution to becoming like smarter at some point. That's so smart. Like for me, when I hear that, it's like, yeah, that's good writing. Like, yeah, of course, right? You just start leaving that place, and it gives you this level of like, one, because you're smarter, now you got all the control.
Well, that's the thing, is that like I wanted to make it like I wanted them to be as nice as possible. So like I really try to make it like a father and kid situation. Like they don't want power. They just simply want the planet to kind of be more on track. Cause like, they're the reason they even made the communication, because think about it, they're, how do they communicate from that planet to the other? The reason they did that is because they were able to like refine the technology from the previous civilization and get it back. Now they understand, they don't understand math, but they understand that math exists. So they're like, all right, if we get people, we get back on track. That's where they're more thinking
Yeah.
about. They don't think about power. They're really thinking about it in like a nice way. But that brings up a really interesting point, because then flash forward, 300 years after Zako, where are they at now? Maybe they probably do want a little bit more power, right? Because power corrupts eventually. That's good.
I love that they don't even know about this mana. Like they don't even know
Because they have no idea, but they have no
the
idea about their own
historical.
history. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
the
have.
historical context is gone. So it's like,
Yeah,
why would they? Why would they assume that it's valuable? Like,
yeah. The only reason they know is because the government has files on them and like says it. It's like no, according to our history, like the scans that we put on the planet, this was
yeah, it's like this was used for this. It's
yeah,
like,
this what they had.
this is what. That's why I love world building, because it's like you can create all that, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
then put it into the book.
And then the other planet that I made is called Derrit, and it's literally like the Amazonian planet from Futurama. So like
Oh,
yeah, so what it is that like when they get there, and the reason I did this is because again, I make entire planets just for a joke. I swear to God, I do. Right? Is that I love the idea that Zako, who's this like who's the guy, right? Is that when he shows up with his assistant Arya, if he shows up on a planet, they immediately assume Arya is the leader because in their head, why would a guy be a leader? Like that's stupid. What do you make? Is your dog your leader? Like what? What are you? Are you dumb? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's their head. Like that's their head. It's like why would you make such an inferior part of the species leader?
oh
She's
man,
obviously the leader. So like when they get there, they disrespect man. You know what I mean? And
yes,
they're like they're almost like they're almost elf. Well, not they don't have elf features, but like their society is kind of in the same way that like they're naturally tall. You know what I mean? They're about like I would say like 8 to 9 feet. They're they're not really like war minded. They're extremely scientific minded. They're extremely very crazy smart. The technology they have to offer is a terraforming technology.
Mm.
Yeah, so like they're on a different route. The reason they want help is because they have a male version, which is like the big like orcish like brute thing. And the only way that they even have like reproduction because is that the women basically like almost like kind of like weird part is that like they kind of take like semen samples from all of them and then send it over to like the guy section and then like let that just happen and then they kind of like take that back but they hate that aspect of it because they still have to deal with the guys. So
Yeah,
when Zago comes up with this cloning technology, they're like, oh, bet. What do you mean? We're going to just get rid of them completely. But then when they get there, they realize that's obviously a lot more political than it, you know what I
and I
mean?
might have seen at first.
Yeah, because like there's the whole other side, while they are like, I mean, they're dominated. Like the female version really have like 90% of the control of the planet. They run shit 100%. But that 10%, they still, they still mess around. You know what I mean? And especially
Yes.
when you start seeing the other point of view, and especially when Zay goes in his pride, right? He's like, oh, so I'm not the guy, huh? Oh, so like, oh, I'm just guy with these guys. You know what I mean? So like, it's just that whole thing. And again, it's why I love world building. It's because like you develop like a character, and it's not a caricature. He's a character. So when you put him in a situation, they act accordingly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's my favorite part of world building is culture. I think culture is
Yes.
it's always understated. Like one of the things about like our story, we have this
Yeah,
kingdom
I love
called
that pirate thing. Love it.
like the islands of Jaha. Like that's where all the pirates are coming from. And then they're not gonna not be on the mainland. Like they're gonna be on the mainland too. So there they are, freaking adding pirates to the mainland. So then we have like this kingdom called Cold. And in Cold, women aren't allowed to fight and they're not allowed to be part of the army or whatever. Which means as a result, they have a very small army. They have a very small army. They're already a small kingdom. And we decided that like that's gonna be a big part of their culture. And it plays a role in the story. Like one of the characters is from Cold. She grew up wanting to fight, and she's a part of the royal house, so
Oh,
she could.
God.
But then she had to leave to actually do it because if she did it, then she wouldn't be able to. And Cold still has those traditional ways. I think in the story they say like, "Oh, women are allowed to carry knives now." Like this is how far they're progressing. Where the Breeze Lands, women can fight and be a part of the army and be a part of the King's Guard, and in the Esterlands they fight and all that. So it's like all these other places let them fight. Why not here? And you get all of this story about why they can't fight there. Um, we have this area called the God's Walk, and that's where Albion originally walked to go meet Eros. And they have this whole culture over there where there is no king or queen that rules. So they have all the imposter houses, all those imposter kings and queens, they get kind of outcasted and they flee because how can you be a ruler if you weren't a god? And that is part of the reason why there's so much conflict, because people overthrow the kingdom or the king or whatever if they are an imposter. They don't let the brother or sister claim the throne. They
They
throw
have
them.
imposter blood. Oh
You have
my
imposter
god.
blood, like, and what they call it is the generation skip. They say that like the generation skip is the reason, right? So some people will say, oh, it's a generation skip. It wasn't for them. Maybe it's for the next generation. And some people say that it doesn't exist at all. So no one knows where this divine blood comes from. So you'll have other people claim to be king. And then if they make it to 40 and they ascend, then maybe they were right. And the council ultimately confirms anyone that ascends. So it's like that, but we make it so the cultures are also different that some people just can't. Like some houses just never make it. And in our lore video, we talk a little bit about like the original house, the houses that are in the book are not all the same houses that originally started the lore. And the reason is the wars and fighting that have happened in the years leading up. Like there's just been too much that's happened. So many people have died and been imposters and gotten pushed aside. And we get to explore we're exploring more of the imposters in book 2. In book 1, they get to be a piece of the story, but in book 2, you get to see what happens when you're an imposter king or queen and how that plays a role in your life.
Well, without getting too much into the spoilers of book 2, could you glaze into like what the point of views are going to be? Are you still going into the same 3 kings, or are you going to switch it up? How are you doing that?
So we'll switch it up for book 2. Book 2 will follow one character that you meet, or 2 characters that you meet in book 1. It will follow one of the kings you meet, and it will follow a brand new princess, a princess from a house that you don't get to necessarily see. Because in book 1, which is not a spoiler because it happens in book 1 pretty often, there's a House Solomon. They control Eridan, a kingdom that we don't visit in book 1. In House Solomon, their queen never comes out. She never leaves their kingdom. So she didn't come to the Tournament of Champions. She doesn't come to any functions that other royalty go to. And in book 2, you see why.
Okay. I like that, man. Oh my god. All right. Well, normally I would switch gears into the other type of writing, but my god, I love this fantasy talk so much. What's your Mount Rushmore of fantasy writers? Well, fantasy books. And they can be series. It doesn't have to be like,
So I would have to say, for me personally, I would definitely I have to throw Game of Thrones on there just because even though it's not done, it is just amazing. Every time I read it, I feel like I learn more every time I read it. So Game of Thrones is on that list. I would throw Mistborn on there. I really
What is that about?
It's Brandon Sanderson's work, and Mistborn, that trilogy is interesting. It has I think it teaches. It's hard to not spoil it. That's why I'm not going to talk too much about it. But it's hard to not spoil because it's so like once you start getting a little details, start seeing too much. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's when you know it's a good book.
highly suggest Mistborn. If I got to choose 2 more, 2 more. Honestly, I'm gonna say The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's for kids, right?
No, Narnia's great.
Oh, but it's so good, like
phenomenal.
It's like it's written for that age group, but it is amazing. Like it's so hard to not say that Narnia didn't change the game. Like that changed the game. Man.
I mean, people. It's almost the same thing with like comedy and Richard Pryor. When people
Yes.
listen to like Richard Pryor, it's like, oh, he's not that funny. It's like, yeah, he's not that funny because he invented that type of comedy. What are you talking about? It's the same thing with
Yes.
like Narnia. It's like, dude, the idea of going into a closet and going to a different place, he invented that. You get
Yeah.
that?
It's
Like
like you can't.
now it's like, oh, whatever. It's like, yeah, it's now whatever because they made that.
Yes, he made Portal Fantasy. Like
You know what I
that
mean?
didn't exist,
It
and then he
didn't exist
created it.
prior to that. What are you talking about, dude?
So Narnia, yeah, Chronicles of Narnia. It's so hard not to put on there because it, and the world itself is so well thought out and well built. In my opinion, I love I love the storyline.
Yeah.
I love it.
All
Uh,
that fawn stuff. It's like, he OG'd that. Like, and
yeah,
it's gotta
uh,
give respect. Same with Land of Oz too.
yeah, Flint Eyes.
Yeah.
And the other one, I think it's gonna be Harry Potter for me.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be
Good
Harry
one.
Potter. Probably because Harry Potter, even though the magic system can sometimes be broken, it was so interesting. Like it's probably at its peak was like the most interesting fantasy story you could really read.
She has a
And
great through line
yeah,
in her writing. That's what it is to me.
it's very very like oh man, I don't know. It's just so good. I mean, I don't think Harry is the best protagonist personally. I think Harry isn't the best protagonist.
I don't even like necessarily the world. I don't like how he's like a magnet to the
Yeah.
world, that everything is around him. Listen, you watch the first three movies and tell me you don't know the ending by halfway through. It's like, oh wait, I'll raise my hand to this one, teacher. Is it gonna end with them in Christmas? Is it gonna be Slytherin? Is it gonna be Slytherin up 100 points, but then Harry comes out with a low?
Of
Oh no,
course.
Gryffindor's up 300. Oh, they won.
Of-
Guarantee. That's the first three books. That's the first three books. Tell me a
well,
line.
no, but you're telling the truth. It's like it's so predictable.
But you're there though.
But you're in it. But you're in it. You're three
Yeah.
books in, right?
That's why you gotta hate stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like I love Percy Jackson. That was my thing that I grew up on because I was a huge like history nerd, and I loved Rome, and I loved all that stuff. And he's actually getting into like other cultures now too.
Really?
Yeah, it's getting really awesome. He's because he's jumped into like Nordic and things like that, but now he's getting into like Celtic and African. Yeah, it's actually like really awesome. I think his latest one is like an African sci-fi.
That sounds wild.
Yeah, man. God, I just love it because I think I'm Dominican, so I have the Taino background. So like basically when Columbus came over, there were like, we were chilling on Hispaniola, which was like the island in like the Caribbean. Like we were, when they talk about him landing in America for the first time, it was to Dominican Republic. So he landed, and it was like we were just like chilling, natives running around naked, doing whatever, right? And then they were like, "Yo, we actually like that gold you got." And then they were like, "Oh, well, we don't believe in possessions where, we just like use gold because it's like easy to form and like, like it's our gods and stuff." It's like, "Oh, gods, no. We're going to melt all that stuff. We're going to turn it into coin." "Oh, you don't know what money is? We're going to show you because we're about to sell you. And you're going to be."
You get a first-hand look.
You're going to get a first-hand look of value. And then that was the sugar plantation. If you watch the movie El Dorado, which I love, it's like the On the Road to El Dorado. It's like a Disney movie that it's like two like explorers go and search in like the Amazon jungle for like the lost city El Dorado, the city of gold. In that movie, which I'm not kidding, they showed me on the way. When I was in Mexico in Cancun on the way to a Mayan ruin, they put that on the bus. And as I was watching it as an adult for the first time, I realized that they literally threaten. That's a threat that one of the characters say, that like it goes like, "Hey, if you don't stop messing around, I'm gonna send you to sugar plantations, Dominican Republic." That, you know what I mean? That culture. I mean, I think that's the reason that like I love culture and books and literature and fantasy and all these things, because it's unreal how much culture affects everything, but how much it can get muddled by time, and how one culture can just decide to wipe out another completely. You know what I mean? All I know about like the gods of like my ancestors are names. That's it. And then like
Yeah.
all the statues that they had were melted down for coins. So like all physical proof of what they were of of like representations or what they actually believed are all gone. The only things that we know of are just like people tattoos that lasted and like random things. All their text, if they had much, all burned because they were considered heretics by the Crusades, by Isabella Ferdinand. I mean, it's just crazy. And for as sad as that is, it's also so interesting because then like as the writer, you get to manipulate the type of story in your own type of like in your own sense. You get to write about just world. But I don't even have anything about that, but just kind of going off that riff. Imagine writing about a society that was a crazy prominent, but there's nothing about them.
Mm.
Crazy prominent, but there's nothing about them.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, I see that.
I've
That's
never thought about that till right now, honestly.
yeah, that's a crazy thought. I was just thinking in my head, like that's interesting to
To
pull. I
play
mean,
with.
because we got other books, and I mean, I mean looking for material, and that is like
I'll
that
give it to you. Take
idea.
it.
That idea right there is just so interesting because I'm thinking, right, like who was in the islands of Jaha before the Low King? What was that culture like? What was that world like? And how did that get either changed,
And
manipulated,
yeah, they could have
altered?
got wiped out. And it doesn't even have to be another culture. It could be natural. If they're on islands, a tsunami could have wiped out.
A hurricane could have taken it all away.
Oh, dude, no technology. That means that they had huts.
Oh, it's like what?
What are
And
you
then
talking
what?
about? A hurricane?
And then
Done.
what? And then what
No
lasted?
evidence.
What stays? Right? What stays afterwards?
Maybe a
What's the
warrior's
remnant?
idol. Ooh,
Yes,
cave.
a cave,
Whatchamacallit? Cave scriptures. Like what they found in France. Cave
carvings.
paintings.
It's like what stayed, right? And then how does that influence those people? How does that change the way they?
And that turns into a religion, and that it forms into the base of what religion is. I can tell you right now, it's a spoiler because I have crazy amount of books like plotted out, but I would say by chapter, well, not chapter. I would say by I think book 15, which like I mean I don't know, it'll take me fucking 10 at least years to like get to that point. But at around that stage, the things that happen in book 1 and 2 become mythological to them, and they become
Mm,
religious sources of religion at that point.
wow.
I don't want to get too much into it because like crazy amount of spoilers, but like yeah. So like the events that happen in these books eventually become mythicized over time, and because the uh, great amount of time happens between these stories, and by the time it gets to 10 15 10 15 depending on how each like series actually gets like breaking apart, it's yeah, it doubles back and those characters are now religious things, and a lot of their stories are now mythicized. A lot of the things that were just like normal, now they're everything about that's the thing, is that when a person becomes even now you see it when you know you look at any famous person, right? When they become famous, you look at a Kevin Hart, you look at a Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now everything in their previous past now has to seem godlike too,
Yes.
right? You put them in an interview, and their mom is all about, it's like, oh no, they were doing since he was like 2 years old, he was making me laugh, right? It's like everything about their life now has to be mythical, right? It's nothing about. That's why I love Bill Burr, because he's so honest about it. He was like, yeah, I didn't get my life together until I was until like 30. And I love that genuine like talk about it, because it's like that's how humans act. For whatever reason, when you hit like a point, we love to act that like, oh no, now everything prior was like this mythical thing. And that's something that happens on a crazy heightened level with religion. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Scientology, we literally know the guy was alive. We have pictures of this dude. We know he wasn't like a crazy deity. I don't want to get like me too by the Scientology community right now, but like we know, you know what I mean? We know for a fact this dude was writing science fiction books, and then only 50 years later, there's a whole religion about him, and he's mythicized.
Mm-hmm.
And now everything about his life is mythical, and he's a god, and he's a god-like being now to them. And the same thing happens in these series, where like the acts that happens, now the entire everything about them is now godlike. And I think I love that idea as a reader because you literally wrote, I mean, you literally read their real life first person point of view living that. And now you're in chapter 15 and people are talking about, it's like, oh no, remember that time he walked on water and did a goal? It was like, no, that didn't happen. I read that book. What are you talking about?
I saw that.
That wasn't real.
That's the idea behind the High King for us. Is the same idea as like, what did he actually do? Like if you think about what he actually did, one of the things that gets told about him is like he ended the 100-Year War, but he walked in the middle of the battlefield and everyone dropped their weapons. Like they say that happened, and people believe that that's how the war ended. Like him walking in the middle of the battlefield and everyone dropping their weapons. You and me both know that's not possible.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way all these people saw him and dropped their weapons. But that's how people perceive it after time and after hearing the story of the High King. It's the same guy who fell into the volcano and lived. It's the same guy who water came after he visited the city. Like the drought ended. It's like,
but it's the lack of proof that solidifies it. You know what I mean?
And there's nothing that
it's the
says
fact that you can't point to it. You know, it's like, oh well.
And he's a god, right? Like he's
it's like, what do you mean? Okay, it happens.
and you have to believe it. So we
think about air. What about gravity? Well, you know,
we think of
all that logic.
We thought about that, right? Like, what can you prove? What can't you prove? And then having characters that kind of have legacies, like all of the guys in our story, they all have this legacy, this air around them about things they did when they were kings and queens that other kingdoms only heard about. They never saw it. They only heard about it. And only the people who were there actually saw it. And half of it happens because of nature. And this person got mad at the city. And all of a sudden, the hurricane came a week later, destroyed the city. Okay, now all of a sudden, it must have been them that did it because their anger, their wrath. And you have to accept it because how can you disprove it? That person's a god. And that's the logic behind a lot of the mythology. And then
I love that.
And then figuring out for the reader at least how much of it is real and how much of it is us saying like, no, that actually is because of that, or it's like, oh, they might be lying. And that's the part where in book one we get to play with the lies and deception. It's like maybe the author is lying and deceiving you.
Ooh, I like that. I love false narrative.
And you're getting character perspectives, you're getting point of views. And my hope is, especially with the start of book 2, is you start to see the lies and deception a little bit clearer because you start to realize that there's way more than just 1 or 2 or 3 perspectives on any situation.
Yeah, that's one of the motivations that got me into writing the book. It's like not even the book. It got me into writing. Period. It's I love the idea that through one lens a person can be like so villainous, and then through another he could look like a complete god savior type of person. You know what I mean? Oh God.
Yeah, it's like when I used to play with, when me and my brother used to play with toys, both my brothers, we would always have we would have the villains have their own little saga thing going on, and you'd see how all the villains interact, because back then obviously we weren't as creative as we are now, so all the villains had to be in a little thing. They all had to do their thing together. They had those, like, it was like Power Rangers, like all the bad guys teamed up. So we used to have those like scenes of all the bad guys talking, and you have like your favorite bad person, your favorite villain. Yeah. You're like, oh, he's the cool one.
Which was just the most expensive one that you got for your birthday a couple weeks ago.
The cool one. Like, I remember we had a toy. His name was Skull, and he was a pirate with a skull face, and he was always running stuff. Like he was the number one. And
you know what's my favorite? When a toy gets like damaged, and then like you still using them, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh my gosh, that was him. That was him. He couldn't stand anymore. Like his legs got broke.
Yeah.
And he had to sit all the time because he couldn't stand up.
Remember those old Transformers that came with like 9 billion pieces, right? I lost like 8 billion of them pieces, and I remember it was just like a leg, and I still use that motherfucker.
It's like he's like, he can fight still. He's still
like,
part of it.
This is one strong arm. You better not mess around. No. I think I always turned it as like it's like an artifact now. It's like, oh, if you put that weapon with this, it becomes this. That's what that was always like the plot point I went towards.
It's like the history. But yeah, we used to always do that with our characters, right? You create these, you create, for me at least, how I like to write in general is like there's never a bad guy or good guy. Everyone has their own outlook on the character and whether or not they're bad or good.
Yeah.
Some of them are like you'll probably hate them. Like my goal is to make certain characters you'll probably dislike them, but you might laugh. You might just laugh at what they're saying about the world. You might not like their decisions also. But then there's also other characters that are equally as frustrating and it's in context to that character. So for me, it's like one of our kings, his court sucks. Like they're mean, they kind of diminish his power. And it's like the people who are supposed to report to him are diminishing him, and he's the king. He's supposed to be a god. And you're like, why is that happening? And then you see why. And you're like, oh my gosh, this all sucks. And the kids suck. So like the king also sucks. Like there's no one in this scenario who I can support. But like by default, then you have to support kind of the king that you're following every chapter. so so all the beta readers have had so much fun reading it because he sucks, but at the same time, you're like, I see exactly why, and I can't really deny that he's in the right in certain areas, completely wrong in others, but he's interesting at the very least.
God, I love having. It's almost annoying. I actually killed off my. Oh damn! I should have said that. Well, I didn't say the spoiler fully yet.
Yeah, you didn't say anything about
So I didn't
names. No
say
one
yeah.
knows who.
I didn't say nothing. So we're just gonna glaze on by that. Uh, no, I love creating character. I mean, everything that you're saying so far reminds me so much of Zako, honestly, because it's that whole thing of like a person with power, and it's like you hate them, but then like you start realizing that like they're it's not completely as it may seem, especially when you start getting all the point of views, because what you're seeing, what you're getting is just a selective point of view. You're only getting like that power trip when you start realizing the world, when you start realizing that like there's people that like absolutely adore him. I mean, a great example is that there's because I love mirror symmetry. I love the whole idea of like we already talked about it with the chapter starts off at one thing and 20 years later the same chapter starts off at another. I love the whole thing of a symmetry. So there's a scene where Jid, one character who's like the rebellion leader type of thing, that he's having an address to his side, and then there's a chapter where Zako's having his address. Jid's address is like a nice little like, oh hey, yeah. Zako's address, every word that he says like is like vibrating the terrace that he's on. Like he's like on another level. Like people are like crying, like can't even like losing their minds. Like he is that guy, you know? And like you see that interaction with people, and the moment that's done, he's just like, all right, like just laser, you know what I mean? Just an animal to everybody that's around him. God, I love you gotta love that type of dichotomy, not only in the characters, but just like almost within yourself, because that's what it was able to like create those type of things, right? Like
Yeah, and
I know for me, a lot of my characters are just literally like heightened versions of me divided. Know what I
yeah,
mean?
it was so interesting to write certain characters, and I think that like one thing that I started feeling during the writing process, it was strange at first, but I started feeling kind of like putting myself in that character's eyes,
Yeah.
putting myself in that character's world, and then trying to really understand how they either would react, behave, what they would say, and that was some of the most powerful stuff about the writing process. It's the stuff that I miss the most while I'm doing like everything else. When I'm like reading beta reader feedback and trying to go back in, I find myself constantly trying to put myself in that character again. Like, who are they? What are they feeling in this moment? Like a lot of the beta reader stuff, when I go back to chapters to either polish something or whatever, I'll literally read over a bunch of pages right beforehand just to get my mind back to where that character is emotionally. So when I choose the words and all that stuff, that it all aligns perfectly with where they were. in that piece of their like existence. Because like I said, we like to write our chapters as TV, like what a TV show would look like, and there's scenes, obviously scene breaks and stuff like that, but it's really built like a TV show. Some TV shows start off really hot, like really like right into action. Others start off a little bit quieter, and but all of them always have an introduction that hooks you. And for us, our big thing is every chapter leaves you off with sort of a question, but also some answered, some questions answered.
Like Lost.
And we strive for that. And chapter one is probably the most interesting chapter as far as the amount of questions it produces, because no one knows the world and you're kind of thrown right into it. You're just seeing what's going on. And then by the end, you're left with nothing but questions. And then chapter 2 answers a ton of those questions because you get a little bit more, the pace is a little slower at the beginning as it picks up towards the end, which the end of the chapter 2 just leaves you with so many questions, but they're all different than chapter 1 because you got a lot of answers. And then you pick up the second character perspective, and so you're left with all those questions from chapter 2. You pick up a second character, then you go to the third character, and all the chapters are leaving you with more to be wanted from the last character you were just in. And the hope is, obviously, once people get closer to the end, that you're seeing these stories being told and slowly weaving together. Everyone that's read it has said like they're all starting so strangely apart, but we know that a war is supposed to come. We know that somehow they all end up entangled together. We want to see how. And then when you see how, you see why it all, the second half of the book hits, and you're just like, this is crazy. This is madness. And then you get a few last minute things that kind of set up everything, and then you get the final war arc at the very end. And that's the piece that like we gave a lot of time to. We did a lot of research on what battles would look like, and what the soldier's perspective would be. So it's chaos, right? Like you're on a battlefield. You're not necessarily seeing it from like a falcon view. You're looking at it from the eyes of a human who might die, or in our case, the eyes of a god who's literally a king who's trying to go to war. And you're getting this perspective that's very unique and very interesting. And we tried our best to really just let you see either the what happens in war. People die right next to you, and the chaos of it all. And then towards the end, we get to really start wrapping things up, and we try our best to give you what you didn't know you wanted. And that's how our end is. It's what you didn't know you wanted. And that's how the book kind of gives you that closure on book number 1, because we felt like it's very important to us to make book 1 have closure, and not necessarily make you say, oh, book 2 is going to be about X or Y. You're gonna have no clue what book 2 is gonna be about. That's the goal. Yeah. Like we want book 1 to have the storylines wrapped up, so no one's gonna be left in this place where they feel like book 1 didn't end. Book 1 ends. Like book 1 ends, and it gives you a conclusion that you can be satisfied with. But like as any series, like it's gonna leave you with plenty to worry about for book 2.
I actually got that. I actually got that same feedback from like my novel. Like somebody said it was like yeah, I feel like just like it ended. That there was not going to be like a continuation. Then I was like, wait a minute, but like, what about all those questions that didn't get answered? It was like, oh, it just didn't get answered. I was like, all right, well, there's gonna be a sequel, dog.
That's what
that one.
I feel like that's what you kind of want in a book 1, right? Like you want to answer the questions, but you want untied threads. You want things that people can jump back into with characters that they know or a world that they know, and then some new stuff. And having that first story be complete kind of gives you the feeling like, okay, I got a full experience out of it. One thing we really didn't want was a cliffhanger that's too heavy, because then you get the feeling like, okay, I didn't get the ending. Like, we
Yeah.
didn't get a real ending in this book. So our goal was to be like, this is a legitimate ending to the story that was just told.
Yeah, I like that. Have you ever watched The King on Netflix?
No, I haven't watched it.
Ooh, recommend it. It reminded me immediately when you talk about like the scene of like war from like that point of view. The scenes of war that they have are so gritty in that movie. Great like representation of what you were talking about. And just a great general movie in general. I was actually thinking we should probably fucking watch that.
The King.
In general, though, since you were talking about like shows and movies, what are the movies and TV shows that you say inspire you in writing?
So the big one for me, honestly, is The 100. I don't know if you ever watched it. It's on Netflix right
Oh my
now.
god.
The 100 is
We're about to have a little thing because I make fun of that show a lot with my friends. I haven't done it on the podcast yet,
The
but
100.
I'm about to give you some stuff. I really that was my show for a while, right? But then this is the thing that got me. You tell me if I'm lying about this right now. You tell me that the main character's reaction to anything was
Oh my God.
this. Ready?
Clark.
Huh? Huh?
Clark.
God, I used to have a thing that blood for blood, blood must not. No, that was my favorite thing. Ready? So she encounters a tribe of people that for a season, their entire thing is blood must have blood, right? And
Yes.
then so she is trying to find a way to like fix that answer, right? For a whole season, right? What's her answer by episode 12? Blood must not have blood. Oh,
Blood does not have blood.
I lost my mind with that, dog.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's your answer. Oh, thank God.
Clark was such an interesting main character, interesting lead.
To me, that is a perfect example of like beautifully made like source material and like world that like got devolved by just like teen acting. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That everything just became like so like dramatized and so like instead of like the awesomeness that the world is actually in, you know?
Yo,
like, even the end season of the whole AI thing, I like that blew my mind.
Yeah,
blew my mind,
dude.
It was amazing.
That's what I'm saying, right? For me, the 100 had some of the best world building stuff, because you're talking about a sci-fi, right? It's literally a sci-fi where you go across the galaxy. I feel like I think it was season 5 or 6, and they went to cryo sleep, and Monty finds a way to get a new planet Earth, right? That's where they get to that season 6 arc, and they have the Sons of Gabriel, like right before the Sons of Gabriel and
I said that season 4.
Oh, so yeah, there's a whole thing that goes on, right? This whole arc at season 6 is them solving a problem that I just couldn't. It blew my mind how they solved it.
Oh,
they put them.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they put them in cryo sleep. They go across the galaxy. They have a second wave of like fire that comes across the land, and like so some of it was
the AI. So the bombs do go off, and they're not able to stop it.
So Allie, the bombs that Allie was talking about go off. It happens, and they have to. Some of them have to bunker, at one point. So some of them have to bunker, and then some of them go to outer space, which it's interesting how they get there. Some of it, I like to suspend my belief for sci-fi just because you almost have to sometimes. But some of them go under this bunker. How they tie the bunker into season 7, which is the last season, to me was just so interesting because
you gotta drop it now. You can't do that to me.
Okay, so this is what they do, right? So they make them go into this bunker, and the bunker was the original place that all of the people went when the first wave of nuclear bombs went off. And the people in season 7, they also go across the galaxy at some point in cryosleep, which is how they all get connected. And they have this technology that bounces them from Earth to different planets. So
What?
it's like wormholes. So they have this technology just like wormholes that they discovered the before the bomb goes off in season 1 that puts them in outer space. So before the prime fire happens, they have this technology that has wormholes that they find.
Wait, who finds
This so this guy in season 7, he's called the Shepherd. He's he becomes this religious figure. He's been alive for like 200 years basically, but he's been alive because of cryosleep. He wakes up every so often to be told whether or not they've cracked the code to becoming this higher being. This all is established, right, through this bunker that he originally founded hundreds of years before the season started. And it's before the first season started, and that happened in season 7. So then you get this grand thing where by the end of it, I was like, you guys have done so much to connect all of these stories. It impressed me that one day they were able to do it in the show, because I thought first off, like, no way you're gonna be able to wrap this up correctly. But they did a pretty good job at even making that character in the very end, the Shepherd, this guy that you hated, but he also had a grand purpose. He had this whole religion formed of people who they had this concept, like, I think it was for all mankind is what their mantra was. And basically all the people were raised in a society where they were completely selfless and they would give their lives for the greater good of mankind. And that's what he taught them. And it was for mankind's ascension into becoming sentient beings. And they had
isn't it the guy that got like manipulated by Ali?
No, it's a different guy. So that dude's unfortunately, like, that dude doesn't last much further past Jaha. That's his name.
Okay.
Yeah. He doesn't last much further. But Jaha and Ali, that whole situation, I thought was like this is, for me, The 100 has some really interesting world building.
Amazing world building. It's just the acting.
Oh, the acting's terrible. But
I couldn't get past it.
But they had this
not have blood. Oh, okay.
They had this thing, I think in season 5. It's your one crew, you're an enemy of one crew. Crazy plot twist. So they spend, I think, the first 5-6 episodes just teasing what happened in that bunker for 3 years. So when they go in the bunker, it's supposed to be for a short period of time. I think it ends up being for 4.5 years or 5 years.
What?
So they end up being stuck there for way longer than they thought, because the destruction closes or caves in the bunker. And then they add in some space prison. So they had this spaceship that was full of prisoners that was going around the galaxy that comes back to Earth, lands, and they help them get the people out of the bunker. And from there, there's this whole like conflict between the tree crew and those people versus the people, the prisoners. Crew. And it's called like but they become one crew because
is Olivia still alive?
Octavia wins. She wins the conclave. It becomes just the show is like
it's like a meme, bro.
The amount of things that I can say, like, I feel like the show it is one of the best, like, for me, one of the best built worlds. I wish I could write for that world, because I feel like I could have done so much
justice.
Oh my gosh.
Better dialogue.
Definitely better dialogue. But so I'm gonna spoil it. I'm already spoiling half the show.
Yeah,
so
I could have put my dog in a wig. That would have been a better Claire.
So one of the things I thought was the coolest part. So Octavia comes out, and they have this whole thing where what happened in the bunker. She was the leader during this whole time.
Octavia was the leader.
Octavia was the leader.
See, that's what I'm saying.
She got named. I know it doesn't make any sense, because how could she have the skills necessary to?
No, it's her jawline. She can cut through everybody. That's why.
Like, I don't know how she had the skills, but like, if you just dismiss that piece, right? Dismiss that piece of writing, they started calling her Blood Reina. And I was like, why did they call her Blood Reina? What happened? they show you what happens. And at one point, they only had enough food inside of that shelter, that bunker, for I think like a year and a half or 2 years. So when that time hit, they had to find alternative sources for food.
So
And
she
you know what?
became a cannibal.
They all became cannibals.
Gangsta.
Everyone became cannibals, and they had to eat each other. And that's why, and they called it the dark year, where they had to eat each other to survive. And it was by far the craziest shit I've ever seen. Like it was by like I didn't think the show would ever go there. And when they went there, I was like, this show wild. I was like, this is on the CW.
What do you mean the Reapers were season 1, and their whole thing was about the same thing too.
Oh my god.
The Reaper, dude, the Reaper
Mount Weather? Mount Weather? Stop with Mount Weather.
No, I'm trying to tell you, it's like that show. It's almost depressing. You know what? It almost reminds me of a reverse Lost, because like a Lost is like has great acting, but then by the time you get to the end of it, you're like, what the hell? Gosh. What was the point?
Lost.
You know what I mean?
I can't even talk about Lost anymore, dude.
You know what I mean? Because it's the exact opposite of the show. You know what I mean? If only they had switched the world building and the actors. Oh my god,
dude!
You would have had one amazing show and then one really really bad one.
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm talking. Yeah, one really really bad one. The stuff from the 100, the world building stuff. That was a lot of
unmatched.
It was some of the stuff that I really thought was like, this is so interesting that you can do so much. It made me kind of want to like write sci-fi, but I just don't have the skills yet.
Oh no, sci-fi is that's my stuff.
I don't got this
till I die.
I don't got the skills yet for it, so I'm like, I'm not gonna touch that yet. But the world building was so cool that I was like, and they had so many religions. That's the other piece why I love religion.
Yeah,
the religion in that story is insane. They have so many different tree crew, all these hierarchies that come out. And that's one of the big shows for me that inspires. The other one that really there's a couple. The other one that really interests me is Prison Break.
Man, now that's a good one.
I loved Prison Break, dude.
First season, unmatchable. And then the one after that, they're like, all right, we're going close up back to prison.
Oh my gosh. When you see Prison Break is like
no, but this time we're going to Guatemala.
With this time we're going dude, Stella. You're like, what's this?
Oh, that was a really good one though.
Yeah, Prison Break.
The entire time you're annoyed. You know what they do a really good job of is that, like, man, now that I think about it, I need to do it because like it's really good. Like it's pretty cool writing. It's like when you make a character that you know everybody hates, but you just refuse to not kill that mother. You know what I mean? Like what was the Southern serial killer that everybody hated, the rapist guy from Prison Break?
You talking about
you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
Everybody hates that dude.
He had his hand cut off.
Yeah. He was the real mousy, scrawny looking guy with a Southern, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. For at least how long did it take you? What?
He made it to the last season.
No, but it took you what, 30 minutes to hate him, right? It took you 30 minutes to be like, oh no, yeah, he should die right now. And he lasted until the end.
Oh my gosh, that dude lasted
every episode. You're like, is this the one? You almost keep watching it just to make sure is this the episode he's gonna get whacked in, and then he still does it, and you're like, yo,
this dude lasted forever. Like that show for me, that show had a great way of getting characters out of situations that seemed kind of like legit. Like for me, that show had that show did a lot as far as teaching me narrative. Like, how do you get someone out of prison? Like the prison season 1 is probably probably the best written season I've ever seen of any show.
Daredevil, honestly.
Oh,
come on,
dude.
Daredevil.
That's a good contender too. Daredevil's
almost unmatched for me.
The fight scene in the hallway.
Wait, but which one? The one that he's going down the staircase, or the one that he's getting the German kid?
Getting the German kid, dude. Oh my gosh, that is Netflix at its finest.
I remember I was with oh my god, because I want to get into this too. We're both like you're a brother from Boston. I
Yes.
cannot get over that. But I definitely want to get into a second. But while I was at Wentworth, right down the street from you, I
Mhm.
was going. I had like my ex, and we were watching the movie. And she wasn't even in to superhero stuff at all. And I remember we both would like foam at the mouth over that show. Because I remember when it first came out, because it was like Netflix binging. Like at the time, Netflix binging was still kind of like a new thing,
Yeah.
right? That people were just getting into the idea of like binging and knocking out like a full like season, like a couple of days, in like a day or two. I remember when that show came out, we were dying, and that when that scene came out,
Mm.
like when it got to that scene, I had like reset it like a 3 times. And then we kept on geeking out because she was actually pretty good like at picking up like movie stuff too. And she was like, "Oh, that's one shot," and I was, "That's not one shot."
One shot, dude.
And then I went back and I'm like, "Oh my god!" And the drools at this point is like forming a little thing. There's like mouse rolling a boat on it, like
One
I'm losing my mind. It's
the
one
one
shot,
shot,
one shot.
it's insane. It just insane. So I remember the dude's
My
name.
favorite is
The
when he
dude's name is
grabs his
the dude's
arms.
name is Teabag, dude. Teabag.
What do you mean?
That's the dude from Prison Break. Teabag. That's his name.
Yup. Okay.
That's the dude's name. I remembered it. I was like,
God, I hate
I
that
could
guy.
not stand that man. Yeah, especially when he took the dude's identity. He took the guy's identity and he was acting like someone else. And I was, oh man, I could not.
And then of course they had to put a little emotional thing where it showed him be like, oh well, maybe he could be a regular guy for a little bit, and then like obviously he cracks in like a day and a half. It's like, oh,
Oh,
you animal. If
just
you get shot today, right
oh
now,
my gosh.
it's weird that you get like that much emotion, right? Because like my God, Louis C.K. has like a great joke that like how crazy the idea of road rage is. That he
Yeah.
was like talking about that like when you're in a car and you're like that far from a person and they do a little thing that you don't like. They move into an intersection just a little too fast or a little too slow. You're cursing them out like with like the vigor that they just killed you, your entire family. Like, you know what I mean? You're going, oh, you and then he was like talking about like, imagine if you got rid of a car, the confinements of a car, and you were just yelling like that at a person at the same distance, but you're not in a car. You're an animal. You'd be put in jail that day. Like, you know what I
Facts.
mean? But for whatever reason, you're put in a confinement of a car, and it's perfectly okay. You know what's my favorite? When you catch another person giving you road rage. You ever see that?
Yeah, well, absolutely, all the time.
When you make a genuine mistake to the point that you're like, oh no, I get that. My bad, bro. I'll give you your 5-4 licks on that one.
It's like, go ahead, dude.
Yeah,
Just
no,
go off for me.
yeah, go ahead. I get it. And all you see is I can't not laugh. And obviously, that always makes the other person a lot more mad. But like, again, it's like imagine the scene that you were talking about. Then it's like instead of hearing all the yelling, all I'm seeing is, you know what I mean? It's like hilarious to me. I'm over, especially if I'm like in a good mood and I'll start like putting in words. So it was like I just saved $500 on my tax insurance by switching to Geico.
Oh man.
There was one guy that like I honestly like I had messed up. I was like talking to a graphic artist right before I had left the house, and then I left, and he responded to me like as I was at a red light, and then like I went to go look at it, and then it turned to a green, and the guy like got mad at me, whatever. And I remember he went. I guess I had took like too long, which was like what 4 seconds, but New England, right?
Yeah.
So like he went and
that's
swerved
a
behind
year.
me, and all I hear it was like, yo, learn how to drive, and he was like said like real like angrily, but then I just sat back and I was like, hey, if you think about it, that's pretty nice. You know what I mean? Like, hey, learn how to drive. It was like, hey, improve your driving, young fellow.
Give
Like
me
I was
some
like thinking
tips.
all the positive. Exactly. I was like, hey, you just give me a tip. A lot of empathy if you really think about it.
He's concerned about me on the road.
Yeah, you know what I mean? If only we could be as progressive as that guy. Oh man. Well, you told me about your favorite things. One thing I want to get into, because I'm just so I love the way that it was that you had written it was your poetry.
Mm.
Now, one thing I'm putting you on the spot here, and you can 100% decline, but I'm just so interested to read, especially because it's a full rhyming poetry. You find a lot of poetry nowadays that is just like doesn't have that nice little stanza. I love a good rhyming stanza poem. Do you mind reading some of it?
I can definitely read a little bit of it.
Okay.
I have I don't read my poems often, but but I have no problem doing that.
Just because I really do feel that like the whole like you wrote it, so you know where the pauses go. Like I want to hear it how you have it in how you wrote it in your head, you know?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick one too. Let me see.
I read my God, now the names are like disappearing from me, but I read all of them, but the last one that you have on your website. So with the first one is what called the edge or
The
the red,
next,
the next. I'm sorry, and then the one after that,
that's the Black Agenda.
yeah, Black Agenda. That was the one with the I have a dream.
Yes,
Yeah, that was a really cool one. I like that.
that one was inspired by LeBron James. He had come out and made a statement, and he had so a lot of my poems come from from different places. One was the I Have a Dream one. That one was really LeBron. He had made a statement that week, and I thought it was just powerful. So I decided to throw that out there. The one I'll read right now. This is the next. This is the one I actually had this one published in a few different academic journals because some people resonated with the message of it.
Yeah, it was a really good one.
And actually, this is the LeBron quote. So LeBron said, so this is what it says. It starts, why doesn't America love us? This question embodies strife. I had a dream that one day I was stopped by a cop and didn't fear for my life. I had a dream that one day I walked into a store and no one raised the cashier to stare. I had a dream that one day I put my hoodie on and knew that no one would cause a public scare. I had a dream that one day I went jogging and didn't feel like I was tempting fate. I had a dream that one day my biracial children will grow up in a world that they won't have to hate. In a society where the most dangerous thing you can be is black, I was a threat before you even met me. From an early age, I was taught the rules of the world that would protect me. My dad said, when an officer says stop, you put your hands up and say, don't shoot. Drop to your knees, and if the same man stomps on your face, don't resist, just kiss his boot. My father was a felon, and he taught me many life lessons. And here's the truth: a suit can't cover enough skin to make me bulletproof.
Hmm.
And furthermore, a
That is a
master's
good line.
degree, and furthermore, a master's degree won't make me equal to a person who believes they're still my master. And if master has a gun and a shield, they might as well be considered pastor. They play God when they see us, deciding how much air pumps through your chest. They play the ventilator, deciding if your lung can catch the next breath. Who knew that taking a knee in Minnesota would make California waves? Maybe the boy with the fro on the Niners didn't make it clear there's enough black men in graves. The man in front of the gun lives forever, but did his life matter anyway? I have sinned many times on many days, but America has taught me living as a black man was my biggest way. Some quick history before the slave ships and the lives taken building this country. Nas said we were kings and queens, never porch monkeys. We were kings and queens. Our lives mattered back then. My black ancestors taught the Greeks and Romans way back when. African kingdoms gave away the gold that built these so-called great places. Alexander went to Egypt. When Alexander went to Egypt, it was
It's on
covered by
mountains
mountains with
with
black
black faces.
faces. Yet now I face mortality every time I leave the house. Correction. I face mortality every time I breathe. Inception.
Inception.
I was born black. Dark skin was gifted, not optional. Someday I look at white skin and witness what's truly possible. I'm just looking for a system that works. Justice being granted to wrongdoings, not a media where every single instance of crime defines what they're all doing. Politicians are good at hearing the issues of black folks. Yet year after year, nothing changes and we stay broke. I went to college, double majored, got a degree, then went to grad school and got another. So why, when I see an officer, do I think to myself, yeah, I'm just another brother? Martin and Malcolm had a dilemma. What's peace if there's not justice for all? We live in a world where the big diminish the lives of the small. There's two worlds, those who love and those who don't. There's two types of people, those who fight for equality and those who won't. We sit back silently, allowing prejudice and racism to stand. But I can't scream and shout because I'm a black man. My elevation only allows for so much conversation. For the pain I feel deep down in my heart, there is no reparation. My heart goes out to all the families who lost a son, daughter, father, or mother. I ponder, would there be justice if one bad cop took the life of my brother? I sit here today and ask a simple question. Am I next? Is that what it will take for those around me to gain context? I've been asked, how do you build a society and a culture that rests on a broken foundation? A better question, in my opinion, is this is whether this is a rebirth or a renovation. Do we start in the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom, or the front yard? All black people want is for y'all to get started somewhere. It's not hard. Rip up the floors, bash through the sheetrock, and even if it takes all night, when it's time for installation, ask us if the new process is all right. All right. Black Lives Matter. There should be no debate on that. But will change come through peaceful protest or combat? The rioting and looting are a sign of hurt and disdain. The same feeling we all felt watching George Floyd scream out for his mom in pain. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. You are going to kill him. They are going to kill us. The land of the free and home of the brave, and God we trust. So that's the that poem was the first one I wrote um directly after the shooting of George Floyd. That was my initial reaction to everything going on. And I think a lot of it came from just seeing the way people around me had processed the situation. So many people have reached out and said like, "Hey, hope you're doing well," or "Hey man, I see you. I'm here for you." And I just thought in my head like there's not really a way for me to describe what the feelings I'm feeling are. And I knew that there was a lot of people like me that were having a hard time to really putting it into words. So I just said, this is the way I'm perceiving this whole situation, this whole incident, and I think that was the response to it, the poem that felt the most relevant at the time.
I fear for every day in my life, correction. I fear for every breath I take, inception. My guy. That's a good one.
That line was definitely the feeling like no matter what I do, I'm going to feel like I'm gonna feel this. Like it's like the correction piece is like, yeah, like actually that's not true. Like I fear every time I breathe, right? Because that's how easy it can stop. Like if I'm walking around being a black person, I have to think about that all the time. That's the inception piece. It's like I fear
Mm.
all the time. So it's not just in certain situations.
And the Mansa Musa. I mean, I actually didn't even know about that. I read all up into that. That was
Oh yeah.
a quick like little half hour, 45 minutes. I put way whole into that. That was amazing. I loved it.
The history I had to add in there.
My God. It was actually like I actually did like a lot of poetry when I was younger. You inspired me to write a little like a little like 8 line thing. The
Mm.
moment I the moment I read all of yours, I went and wrote a little thing right after it. First poet
That's dope though because like
First
I
poetry I
love
had written in
poetry.
like forever.
I love poetry. I think it's an underrated art form because you can do a lot through poetry. You can get a lot of messages out there, and a lot of people can hear you. Um, Another poem. I'll read one more poem.
Yeah, go ahead.
This other poem was it's called the Allied Guidebook.
Yeah, I read that one too.
Some people obviously like it's a
Yeah,
little bit more controversial, but
you switch shoes.
yeah, I had to. I just felt like this is a needed message. So this one goes a little like, does the Allied Guidebook is what if my skin What if my skin would burn red by the sun? What if my hair fit nicely up in that bun? What if my skin grew more pale in the winter? What if my family tree went as far back as books can remember? Would I drift around in my privilege, or would I let it sink in? Or I'll let the truth sink? They say you can lead someone to knowledge, but you can't make them think.
Mm.
I would. I wouldn't know what to do. I would believe the stories that they said were true. I would believe that the cops police them more often because they really do. I would believe that some drug dealers were book smart too. I would believe that their teachers didn't give them the same care and attention. I would believe that when they said they didn't, I would believe them when they said they didn't deserve that in school suspension. I would believe that being black starts them at a significant handicap. I'll believe in Black Lives Matter and I stand alongside Colin Cap. I would follow the great examples of allies from years past. I would remember my people marching with Martin and Harriet's helpers had a tall task. I would admit that white privilege might give me an unseen advantage. I would recognize that my race is something I never regularly had to manage.
Mm.
I would come to understand that saying I see no color is ignorance. I would apologize for my mistakes and begin to watch my statements. I would begin to realize I would realize that someone else's race may craft their identity. I would recognize denying that is wrong coming from someone that looks like me. I would eliminate the N word from my dictionary. I would look at someone's color as a friend, or someone of color as a friend and not an adversary. I would talk to the people directly about their pains and they feel. I would attentively listen to the stories, then be honest and real. I would never tell a black person to get over slavery at all. I would march on the right side of history and stand with y'all. I would see my color as a chance to bridge the gap. I would understand that there are some people in my circle I have to scrap. I would be the type of person that always puts a human first. I wouldn't be ignorant, evil, raceless, because that's the worst. I would, if I if I were white, I would learn to be an ally above all else. I would want everyone to be treated equitably, not worse than myself. So that was
Mm.
just that was my initial react. That was my reaction to some people who were talking about like learning, right? Like the process of learning and being educated and saying, how can I be an ally? I was like, this is how you become an ally, right? You utilize the benefits that you have, or your platform or your connection. It's not necessarily saying that the world is against Jahmil, right? Because I'm a black man. It's saying like, oh, I can help people like Jahmil who are in this situation, or people like in my family that I can connect with and speak to about the different nuances. Like I'm in an interracial relationship. My wife is white, and the Ally Guidebook really comes from her understanding of my culture, right? Her being willing to listen, and be a part of my life and experience and meet people of color and be a part of the experience of people of color and being able to recognize all that. So for me, that was really what the guidebook was all about, was just the idea that like there are those people out there in the world right now, and you can be one of those folks that see how this stuff affects people of color and what that can do over the course of a long period of time. I got my master's degree in counseling from Central Connecticut State University, and I work at Emmanuel College
Woo.
and College of Fenway. Shout out
Woo.
to Boston.
Hey.
So a lot of the work that I do is around identity development and teaching other people to see each other as human, right? Like the experiences of another human are not invalid, right? Just because it might cause you to feel uncomfortable, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's untrue. It might not be your experience, but it is an experience. And I think bridging the gap and recognizing how if someone can feel that way based off of the actions of someone else, then maybe you can articulate that to people who listen to you because they look like you, or people who listen to you because they don't know people that look like Jahmil. So those were my kind of that's how you become a good ally. You start to push the message of others so that you can help other people understand. For myself, it was becoming an ally to the Muslim community and understanding how I can help uh, their experience, because for a while I didn't know what their experience was. And when I started to really dive into it and speak to people from that community and them talking to me and telling me about how they get treated or how people like look at them when they have their hijabs, and I really had to take a step back and say, what am I saying to the people around me in my inner circle, people that are close to me, about their experience, to make sure that they are more sensitive or understanding of what their comments really look like and how that affects other people. And I think we all do our little parts and you see the bigger change. It's not necessarily you make a huge change on your own. Like, we're not all placed in that position. And what I always talk to my friends about is like, we're not all called to that action, right? Like, we're not all social justice advocates and activists, but we can all help out by speaking to the people close to us, speaking to our friends, and being a little bit more engaged in the lives of someone that maybe has a different experience than we do. And that's how we can help.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
poetry.
almost
That's poetry. Yeah, it's like,
yeah. I mean, like that's why you gotta love it. Like poetry to me is like the mother of all good writing, because it's what brevity is. Poetry is every single word is you can't take out a word, or
yes,
it would it's like a Lego block. It's like Jenga. It would tear everything else apart. It's that beautiful cadence, and you have a beautiful, you have a beautiful structure, and like that's why I wanted you to actually like speak it from yourself, because it's like you know where your pauses are, you know how everything is lined, and then of course the message itself, such a true thing, especially in today's like world. Is just like we have an incredible amount of like lack of empathy, and
mm,
it's not even just in a social aspect, it's an age thing too. How many times do you get on TV and hear these politicians like making litigations and different trying to pass bills where it's like, dude, you're trying to do something that you did when you were 20. Like, where's your head at? Like, just because like you have a suit, and you have to put Rogaine in your hair because you got a bald spot, and like, what, you got to be mad at youth now? Like, where's your head? Like, have a little empathy. You know what a show does is a great way of like doing that? You ever seen that show Modern Family?
absolutely.
All right, Claire and her kids, perfect example. She's always trying to make it that like she like got perfect grades, and she when she was like in school, and she's always trying to make her kids like seeing that she was like all perfect and everything. But even her dad openly tells her like, no, it's a lie and a half. You know what I mean? And they know it, but she still tries to project the idea. And like for whatever reason, we love doing that in society now. That we get to like a high point of it, and then like look back and be like, oh, nah, that's not how it is, that's not what we do. It's like, but it's what was done. you know
And I
there's no
always,
empathy. You
uh,
got to really you got to hang out with people.
yes,
It's
yes,
not cool when a person comes up to you and like says their name, and you're like, oh, what is that? I got a BB, I'll just call you H. It's like, nah, man, take an effort, say his name.
yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
It's it's try, right? Like, like for me, I always joke around. I'm like, people will say Adrian Wojnarowski, right? Like, you can
Yeah,
pronounce Woj, but you can't say like Jamil.
yeah.
Like, you can't say that, but you got to say Perkowski and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
there was a comedian that on Ellen that like roasted her. I didn't even watch Ellen, but I saw like the clip. It was like that she imagine Ellen, so she's like a TV host, and like she tried to pronounce his name and she couldn't do it, and she like glazed over, and he was like, no, no, say my name right. It's this, and she was like, oh, like those names like that. He was like, nah, you say like an English name, no, like Bartholomew
Dude,
Gortrogler the third, but you
her
can't
name is
say my name. It's Habidi Kaidi.
DeGeneres.
Yeah,
DeGeneres.
the
Her name's
generous.
not DeGeneres. How do you even spell? You read that on newspaper, but we all know how to say it, right?
I'm telling you, it's crazy. And the thing is too is that like you have to admit yourself, because like we grew up in a culture that like I grew up in a culture that was okay. I mean, like all the comedians that I grew up on especially after 9/11. Whoo, that was the
Mhm.
people making that. That was the people on the short end of the stick. I'm sorry to tell you.
Yeah.
I didn't decide it. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I was hell on the opposite side of it, but it's the culture. It wasn't until I got older and like realized like oh yeah, that's pretty not cool way of thinking about it. But like you have to let people grow too. You can't just like vilify people on one end and just like
Mhm.
expect. All right, I'll put it to you this way. Anytime I hear like people doing that, have you ever in your personal life yelled at a person and got your point?
Oh no,
Never in your life, right?
not a
So
single time.
how the hell do you think you're gonna go and yell at people that you think are ignorant about them being ignorant and they're gonna stop being ignorant now? It's not gonna happen.
They're not. They're
They're
not.
not.
And
If
part
if
of and
anything,
part of that is
you're gonna heighten it, right? Now they're gonna
yeah.
like instead of saying what they're saying out loud, they're gonna say in a small circle, right?
They become
You're
more
compounding the
defensive.
issue. Yeah,
They become more defensive, and I think one of the things I always try to teach is civil discourse, right? Being able to
exactly.
have these conversations and disagree, but disagree respectfully. And for me, a lot of times it's disagree on fact, disagree on principle. This you can disagree fundamentally, but what you really have to do is always have respect that this person has a worldview that's different.
And
Um,
belief. You have to
yeah, and a
respect
belief.
belief. Yeah.
And in the big piece, uh, is that if what you're talking about or how you're articulating something isn't getting through, it's on you to change your approach or method. Um,
That's a
and
really good point, man.
and I think a lot of times that's difficult. Something even today, like I had a situation where I was talking to someone, and as I was speaking about my point passionately, they were not understanding me. So then the approach I decided to take was a little different. I transitioned and I said, if I did this, would this change something? If I did this, would it change this? Like what can I do to change the outcome? I started to put all of the pressure for change onto myself, right? And what that did was force them to say, like, no, that wouldn't, and no, that wouldn't, and even if you did that, it wouldn't, right? It wouldn't change the outcome or circumstance. So all of the control of this outcome is on me. It's on my end.
Mm.
And that was when they finally recognized that they had all of the power to resolve whatever the issue was in question. And I think that was a piece, like for me, I've had like years of talking and experiencing it now where I've been able to be in settings to learn how to do that. But it is changing your method. Because at first I was just yelling, I was telling him, this is what you should change, this is how you should do it. And he's like, can't do that, can't do that. Shutting down pretty much every time. But after I started pushing it back on myself about if I did this, would it help? He couldn't come up with the answer. He's like, well, if you can't do anything, then there's clearly, and this can't continue. Like I have to do something. So clearly the power is in my hands. And that was the first time he actually saw that the power was really on him. So I think that's an important piece for anyone to recognize is like change your way of communicating because sometimes it's just not working. And doesn't mean that you're wrong or that what you're saying isn't valid. It's just that the way you're saying it doesn't work.
I mean, yeah, the entire art of politics is literally learning how to talk and say one thing and mean another. It's the whole double
Mm-hmm.
talk. It's the whole like 1984 like dystopian thing. That is literally the art of it. It's getting up there and a person being able to ask you a question about jobs, and your answer damn well isn't going to be anything they like, but you still answer it and not lie. It's like, oh well,
Mm-hmm.
job, blah blah. You immediately turn it's like, well, we got to get people back to work, and like wait for the always got to hit with like the buzzwords and like things like that to get people like riled up and like
Yes.
I mean that's the thing is that I got my mind on psychology, and just like when you start just like piecing together like things like that, it's just unreal that you just see like the big pocket. But like anytime a person, a great example, anytime, tell me not, anytime that you get into an argument with a significant like other and they're losing, right? they are doing everything in their possible thing to go off topic. Right,
Yes.
they're bringing up stuff that you did 3 weeks ago that you didn't think that you mentioned. Right, they're poking out. Right, ba ba ba. Now flip that, and you're in the hot seat now, and you're trying to go off topic. Nope, they're keeping you direct. No, no, right,
Every time.
every time, because in a way that's basically what politics is. It's like when they have nothing, they're ready to go, like no answer. They're hitting you with like 20 paragraphs of like, wait, what did they even just say? Wait, what did he answer the question? Wait, what did I even ask? You know, like you're so confused. You're even like, wait, what is down? Like Trump had like, it was unreal how like that dude would answer a question. I remember when the whole Rosie O'Donnell thing came out, and like it was like, oh no, but you said those things, and he said no. It's like, oh no, I didn't say that. And then a reporter in the thing, he was like, oh no, yes, and then quoted him on it, and then Trump just said, oh yeah, I guess so, and then just glazed by it. It's like, dude, that would have torpedoed any other candidate. You understand what I'm saying? Any other candidate would have been there like, and that would have been it. He was like, ah, all right. Yeah, I guess you got a point. Next question, and that was it. That was over.
It's the control of the narrative. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I think of it like writing podcasts. I think as a writer, right? Like you want to be able to control the narrative. If you think for a second, right? How if you included a character that did that, it would fundamentally shift the way the reader's reading things. They'd be like, did they just say that? Did they just get away with just making a statement and moving on?
That's my favorite, is that people go and say it's like, oh, that's unrealistic. It's like, dude, we're living worse. Where are you?
We live in a world where that can happen. And I think character is like the best way to describe it, right? The politicians are sometimes characters of themselves.
Sometimes. They're all characters.
Characters of themselves. They create an image. They create a storyline. They have backstory. The same way we talked about like celebrities. Like I know The Rock, right? He had this $7 story or whatever it was. He has $7 in his pocket. He got cut from the freaking Canadian League, and he had to make a choice. Like I know this.
I could literally hear his assistant typing that out.
Like I know his backstory. Like he has some change. All right, everything. Dog. It's like, of course.
Wasn't your dad like a pretty big up there wrestler? Oh, you had no money growing up? Come on,
of course The Rock did that, right? Like, because it's The Rock. He has to have a story that equates to him. He was being
legendary. That's what I'm
saying.
Was Rocky. Why can't you just be regular, dog? I get you're great now, but why does Al have to be mythical?
Played for the Miami Hurricane.
10 years from now, we're both hella up there, right? We're having dinner with Stephen King. Are we really gonna sit there and be like, oh yeah, I remember when I first got down and wrote that book? It was fire the first time I wrote it. I remember. Editor? I didn't have an editor. I remember that.
Nah, it's like I remember that.
I just wrote it fully. I think I did it in a fortnight. You know what? I actually think I wrote it in like a quill pen, actually, now that I think about it. Yeah, that's what happened. There were like 4 or 5 strippers behind me. Wasn't even paying attention to them because I have mental fortitude, you know?
It's like you create these, they create these stories behind themselves, and that's
to make it mythical. And it's like
it's sort of with politicians, right? Like you get the cliff notes of their story arc of what happened in the last book, and then you get the current updated book, and then you're like, okay, this is the new book. But sometimes they have to change the editions because when they run for office is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, things were different. So now they updated the book. You're like, what happened to the other book that we were reading?
Yeah, Hillary Clinton was the best of that one. She was like, oh, I was never for the war. And then everybody is like, we have literally 9 interviews where you were like 100% for the war. Nope, that wasn't me.
It's like the videos don't even count anymore. That's how I feel about like media. Like sometimes
in the same interview, she was talking about that like that she was like rooting for the Yankees, and then the interviewer goes like, oh, you said the Mets. She goes like, yeah.
Yeah,
that was her answer.
Love the Mets.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Yeah. Which one? The Yankees, the Mets? Where are we? Yeah, okay.
I love the Redskins. You're like, oh my gosh, like, oh no, I don't like
the Redskins. That's not even the right sport. It's like, okay,
like,
all right.
It's like I get it, and that's why I think it's important, right? Like for me, the dialogue, like the Redskins, for instance, Like I hated that team name for a while. And I was like, something has to change. I think the this whole movement that happened in June really forced a lot of teams to reevaluate, which is why they're the Washington football team now. And I think that's the kind of stuff that goes beyond just the political movement, right? It goes beyond just politics. It goes beyond the story arcs and the narratives, but at the same time, it feeds into the overall story. One thing I wish I could write, but I never could because I just don't have the patience. Is like historical fiction, like being able to take like alternate history. I could never write alternate history because I feel like there's just
I got a really good one.
I always feel like there's just something I would get wrong, and I'm looking for good alternate like
I'll
history because I
I'll
think it's
I'll, I'll
dope.
give you a good one. I'm probably not. I mean, I already told you. I got like 20 books. I don't, if I die and get everything I have in my head, I'll be happy.
Mm.
So anytime I got a new idea, I'll be like, all right, whatever, you can just keep it. All right. So uh, you go back in time to kill Hitler, right? Like how it is that like there's people like developing the technology. And then there's like this one random janitor that he gets like this idea. He goes like, "Oh, I'm gonna do it," you know. So like when everybody's gone, he like goes by himself and goes back to history. But then he realized that when he goes back, he real like he realized that like every single person ever in all of reality in all dimension ever had the same idea of like going back to kill Hitler. So it's like 1941 Germany is like at a higher point of technology than like any other point in like human history because like everybody came to that thing and it's just like a crazy hub of like technology because everybody is trying to get this dude and it just like develops from there.
Yo, like that's the kind of stuff like that is so interesting because yeah, right? Isn't that something people would want to do?
Yeah, and
And
it
it's
gets there and he's like hella late and like everybody and it becomes into like a war because there's people that come that like there's like the you know the future neo-Nazis that like come back to protect, and then
Mhm.
there's like the people that go back and it's like a huge thing, and then the Hitler's in the middle as like a kid that likes art, right, because it's before any of that corruption, so he's generally just like a right, like no like hatred in his heart, just like with a little like spinny like hat on, you know, I'm talking about the propeller hat with like a huge
Yes.
lollipop. Different
Yeah.
type of, you know.
It makes me think, right? So one of the areas in our story that we kind of touch on, we don't have racism exist in our story.
Yeah, me. I don't have skin tone in my book.
We don't
Everybody's the same skin tone because it's like by this point everyone's been blended out, so there's no more like black or thing. It's just everyone's
yeah
the same skin
we
color.
so we hated the idea of having racism. We were like, this is it's just stupid.
Yeah, I have classism though. I do have that.
So we have nationalism,
Yeah,
right? So everyone cares about their kingdom a lot.
yeah,
And that becomes like way bigger of a piece of the story because we thought like in a world where like the Washington football team, they they never even choose that other name, right? They never even choose that other name because why would they? Like, what if you could have a world like that where that never has to exist? And a lot of the storyline that we write is nationalism. Like that's where people would defer. It would be nationalism and religion, because the other thing we didn't include sexuality. We said sexuality, throw it out. We're not going to even include people having those like conversations. They don't
yeah,
care. They don't care about that, and they don't care about racism. What happens? They care about religion way more, and now nationalism matters so much more. People care
yeah.
about where they're from,
I mean, we have it now. Texas
and,
versus, you know.
and we have it now, right? So it's like imagine it being accelerated because some people uh when I think about it, and you probably relate to this, it's like the psychology of somebody is that they're gonna connect with something. They have to.
Yeah,
The same way, like we'll connect with the city of Boston, like Boston, like
yeah,
we connect with it. So you have to find something to connect with. People connect with their identity, they connect with their history, they connect with their heritage. They'll connect with their nationality, they'll connect with their religion that much stronger if the other things aren't playing a factor. If race, if sexuality, and we tried to, and we even did it with gender in a few other places. So in the places that don't care about gender and let women fight, they have very different ways that women operate and all that. So we did it with them to see, like, okay, in those places, what does it look like versus somewhere else that has that, and how does the gender piece take away or add to someone else? So I always think that those are always interesting points to add in, uh, even if they're not explored deeply in the story. It's always good to have in the story, like a raceless society. It's like, it's dope. Like, let's talk about the world with just the human psychology. Let's
Yeah.
talk with the world with just the human mind. Let's not have to worry about, oh, these people are this and these people are that. It's like, no, let's talk about how they would point out the differences, regardless of these other things. They'll find something. It's
God,
people.
that is awesome. My God. I mean, I just love the entire idea that you have. Oh, one thing I want to do is I want to show people off your website.
Hey,
Let me get that up.
yeah, we worked pretty hard on the website. It was a long endeavor.
Yeah, trust me on that. I got my website up and running, I think like a week and a half ago. It is not a small task by any degree. What was it again?
So it's inspired by Jahmil.com.
There we go.
Yeah, it's I think that the website was a major move. It was something I did over the summer alongside my wife. We were thinking about branding and trying to get everything under one roof, and I think that's where the website really came. The idea for the website came from, um, trying to put all of the podcasts. I actually have two podcasts. One is the Books by Authors podcast. The other is the Status Update podcast, and both of those are up on the website with some information, and then all those other areas, how to book and all that stuff. And we're building out the final page for the book launch when it happens.
And here we go. This is the website.
Yes.
As you can see, here's the IG, LinkedIn, Facebook, Spotify for the podcast. Check that out. Follow this man.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
The website inspired by Jahmil. If this thing, and there is the Spotify. Check this
Yes.
out.
Definitely check
Jahmil
out this
Nation.
Jamila Nation. That's the Spotify account. You can see all the places, all the people I follow. Big one is Trey Tuck. He's my guy. He does all the music for the
Yes.
intro for my podcast.
Yeah,
He
that's in
does
here
pretty much
somewhere.
everything.
Let me find it right here. Oh no, it's affiliates. That's where it's at.
Yeah, it's up on affiliates. I'm working with a couple of brands for clothing. He would love first. Another one is Only Humans. That one is not up on the website yet. Saved by Christ Apparel. That's another big one. Got some discount codes going on. And then Trey, he's dope. He's a dope artist from Connecticut. He he's actually just released the album 2 weeks ago on Black Friday, and his music is awesome. You can definitely hear it in my intro. I have a podcast episode out with him on it, on the Status Update podcast, found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the good stuff. And he's amazing. So I always like to
Yep.
plug him.
And then the book for the High Council book series. Yep, everything is up here. And
We got the
then
launch coming for the book, the countdown. You're gonna get more information. I'm getting ready to put the rest of it up there, so I'm
very
excited for
nice.
that. That one's getting designed by a graphic designer, so it should be an even nicer page than the rest of them.
Oh heck yeah. And then resources. This is where you can find all the poems.
Yes,
So
and that's a big one.
yeah, so make sure to go ahead and read up on all these. The ones that he read on the podcast today were the Ally Guidebook, and the next, I really recommend the Black Agenda, Unlikely Marriage. I mean, they're all phenomenal. And I mean, if you listen to this podcast and you're not interested in his book, I don't know what's wrong with you, my G. Like, well, I guess we all have a couple things wrong with us, but you don't understand what I'm saying. Like, this, I mean, I'm real excited for the whole series. I mean, just I've talked about it a couple times. The whole reason for this podcast is people always have this idea that especially when it comes to length, is that they're scared that they can talk for that long, because it's like they're scared that they're going to be able to promote their book for that long and to be talk for that long. It's like, listen, writing comes from you, right? Meaning that if I break down your personality over a couple hours and just of you talking about your favorite writing and just like, just talking how we normally do, just free form conversation, that is selling your writing, because the way that you think influences how you write. And if you can say some really interesting stuff in 2 hours, I can guarantee you, if I give you a year to write down those thoughts and edit it, it's going to be phenomenal. You know what I mean? This is 2 hours unedited. This is not going to be edited. And we've gone way over 2 hours. We're going to be at the 3 hour mark, which is a special little club.
Hey.
Not bragging. Not bragging. But it is a special little club. All right. And, it's just, there's nothing better than the feeling of talking to fellow authors, of breaking down the world building that we were just talking about. We both went on awesome ideas, and a phenomenal podcast. Where else can people find you? Is there anything else you want to promote or anything else?
So you can definitely find me on Inspired by Jahmil on Instagram. That's where I post up most things. You can follow the Books by Authors podcast on Facebook. You can follow the Status Update podcast on Facebook. My wife has a whole bunch going on. She has a blog. It's Class by Caitlin with the CAITLIN. And yeah, we're doing a lot over here.
Spell it out.
So Class, like CLASSBY, Caitlin, CAITLIN. And you can follow her on Instagram. There's a bunch going on. You can also follow her website. Just follow the links. And yeah, and then the High Council series, book 1, it'll be dropping sometime in 2021. We're looking at a March date potentially. So you'll
look out for that.
You'll definitely get more information on that. First book is War in the Fallows, and we get to follow 3 kings, multi-POV. It's all about lies and deception. All about lies and deception.
Come on.
Tagline is something like, "The world is not always so simple." So you can look into that, and we're super excited to bring it to you. Right now, we're in the beta reader phase, so we're moving along. Cover will be revealed soon. There's a ton going on, and I'm just excited. I'm excited in general. Thank you for having me on. I've loved this conversation. We got to talk about the 100, which I love talking about the 100. I don't care how bad the show is. It is amazing to watch.
Oh, you know what? Might as well keep on talking. Guilty pleasures. I've been wanting to ask people about this. What is your guilty pleasure, right? Because I'm talking all this shit about the 100, but you know what I just saw like last week and loved every minute of it? What? Tokyo Drift.
Oh man.
I don't know what it is, man. Listen, I would consider myself almost a thespian. I really, dial into movies. And over here I am going like, oh, I wonder if he's gonna win the race. I was in it. I'm sorry. I liked it. I liked the movie. I thought the soundtrack was awesome. I thought the Japanese girls were really hot, real hot. And I was in the movie. I was there. The acting, I even thought the acting was solid. Probably horribly acting, but I was in there. That was my guilty pleasure.
Guilty pleasure. I won't lie. So there's really 2, but I'll say both. 1, Survivor. I love Survivor.
Hey, that's not a guilty pleasure. That's a good show.
I could watch Survivor all day.
Oh man, I just got hit.
I've watched.
I just got hit. I just got hit. I saw my first episode last week. Just, it was
Oh my
it
god.
was phenomenal. It was one of the best things I ever saw ever. Hilarious.
Season 27. Season 27 is one
It
of
was
the
on
best.
Netflix.
It's on Netflix.
Yeah, because that
It's
was free. Me too.
that's a good one. That was a smart choice by Netflix. That's one of the best seasons.
It was the beauty versus thing. Yo,
Yep,
tell
Beauty
me
versus
Morgan
Brains
wasn't
versus
so
Brawn versus
fine that
Beauty.
it was just like, yo,
All I'm saying is Tony is my man, yo. Tony's my man's.
yeah,
Um,
Tony was out there.
Tony's crazy.
Tony was
Uh,
out there.
the real guilty pleasure, which is hilarious because I really don't like shows like this. The Bachelor. I I got so into The Bachelor because of HBO
You're
Max.
gonna do well in this community, I'll tell you that.
Oh my god, The Bachelor is one of my favorites. Like I can watch every season. It is the same formula every single
No way.
episode, every single season, and it just shows it shows the worst of people, but it's hilarious.
Did your girl get into? Did your girl get you into it, or did you struggle about on yourself?
I
Listen,
strolled in by myself because I was rewatching Game of Thrones. Finished Game of Thrones second time. I love to watch Game of Thrones while I write. So while we were writing book one, I was watching Game of Thrones. As soon as I finished, I think it was an ad for The Bachelor came up, and I was like, "What is this all about?" I was like, "I always hear about The Bachelor." Clicked on it. From that point, watched every season. It was
now
so
that is
hard.
interesting.
It was so hard not
I have
to
a
watch.
genuine theory that if you stroll into shows, you're a lot more likely to watch that if a person that you're
Mm,
with, like you know what I mean? Because I'm trying to think back, and like anytime that I like that in the Notebook are always things that like a significant other would always like want me to make, and I just couldn't make it past the first 5 minutes of it because it's just like I'm not there. You know what I mean? It's like in my head I've already made it up that I don't want to do it and I'm being forced to.
yeah,
So the
it
moment it
sucks.
starts, I'm just like, oh really? Oh, that's how you want me to act, babe? Oh, no, we can do that. You know what I mean? You know, you immediately start getting into that and like, you know, like start cracking jokes. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if you just got smacked in the mouth right now? You know, things like that to like take you out of the story. And like, they're getting mad listening to it, and you're like getting mad because it's like, oh, why can't you say, you know? But then like I strolled into Vampire Diaries. That's another guilty pleasure that I had. Yeah, exactly. I know the face. It's fine. Uh like, and it was, I would say it was in high school time. Like I don't, and you know what? We're already here. Glee was another one that
Oh,
I watched, and I don't know what it was, but it just like had me. And I would say that again, almost a little bit like the 100, because like when you get to like season like 4, you're like, wait a minute, what am I watching?
what am I doing here? Why am I
Where
spending
am
so
I?
much time? A good bad movie to watch on Netflix. Like it's good. I love the way it was shot. Extraction with I think Chris
Okay,
Hemsworth.
yeah, Chris Hemsworth. Oh, Ragnarok. Oh, phenomenal
So
movie.
so Extraction is him. The whole time I couldn't stop thinking of Thor. So every time he did something, he's like in military clothes and like running around shooting people. The whole time I thought he was Thor. I was like, look at Thor running around shooting people with guns. It was just the funniest thing to watch. It was an hour and a half of him doing action stuff, but I just kept thinking of Thor. So I just like at one point he kicked somebody into a door. I was like, why is Thor kicking kids?
All
It
right,
just
dude.
it's hilarious.
You know
So
what the scene I
it's
always
another
wanted
one.
to write? Like when we get to the point that we get like film adaptations and whatnot. Like I always wanted to write like a scene where like a very high profile actor is doing like some crazy stuff, and then when like he finally interacts with like other characters, they all just go like, Tom Cruise. It's Tom Cruise. Like, you know, everyone's like, for himself, like, dude, you were just running on the wall over there. Holy, how do you do that?
Completely breaks character.
That's the thing is that it's just like it's not even like a character thing. It's just like they're like, holy, it's Cat Williams. You know what I mean? It's just like he really does that stuff in real life. I always wanted to write a scene like that.
So he actually is doing it.
That he actually really is like about that life. He was like, oh my god, it's Tom Cruise. Dude, I just saw you. You really do that. Oh my god.
Yeah, that those I think those are definitely shows. Extraction was hilarious. It was probably the most dude. At one point in that movie, like this dude gets knocked out. You're like, oh dang, like I can't believe he just got knocked out like that. And then all of a sudden you see Thor in a truck and he hits the dude who just knocked him out. I was like, I don't know what just happened, but that was hilarious. Like he's all of a sudden okay. He's driving a truck and hits the dude who just almost killed him. I was like, this show, like this movie is terribly put together, the plot line is paper thin. Like he's trying to save a kid, and that was the whole plot of the movie.
You know what's my favorite?
Oh,
If
it's terrible.
you go on Tubi, like that free streaming service, they have like a lot of like not even B-level movies. They have like C-level movies, right? There's one called The Gingerbread Man or something like that. Listen, I put that on as like I wanted something to, I was like messing around with the computer and I just needed something on, right? I could not stop laughing at this movie. Like it was the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen in your entire life. It was like a little gingerbread man on like a thing, and he has the Hannibal Lecter mouthpiece on him, my G.
Oh no.
He's like on a medical lab and he has the Hannibal Lecter thing and he's like strapped down. He's like talking like all the like wait till I get out of here. And then like just the most ridiculous thing ever. Like he's in a jail, but for whatever reason, at the end of the hallway, there's like scientists working on like a time machine. You know what I mean? Like at that level.
It's wild. Just
wild movie. You're just like, what? Like also like a detective starts like talking like the same accent from Hannibal Lecter, and they had like a little scene of like, it's like, oh, I got Clarice, and he like runs off, and it's like biting people's noses off. It was this was in the first 5 minutes of the movie. I didn't make it past the first 5 minutes because I was just like, I'm overstimulated. I can't make it past. And within 5 minutes, this man was like in jail. They did a Hannibal Lecter remake. They did like a comedy scene. He ate like 5 people's noses, and then he jumped back in time and became Hitler as a gingerbread man. 5 minutes.
Like that montage was crazy.
He's like, yeah, I can't do this. This movie's an hour and a half long. I'm gonna have a heart attack.
I can't keep up. Literally,
I can't do it. Oh my god! All right, well. This really was a phenomenal conversation. Truly, truly, truly. And I would love to hop on your podcast. We'll do a little sharing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I definitely want you back for when the High Council series, watch out for it. You got to be out. But when it is out, I want you to come back again, have an official, little
release,
thing.
All that.
I'll have, I work with lasers. So I actually make laser engraved bookmarks now.
What?
Yeah, check this out. So I had Mark King. This was the podcast right before. Well, actually, this podcast isn't up yet. This is her podcast is coming out this Monday. This is Nicolette Beebe. She did like Mark King. It was like a fantasy story with like a little bit, some elements of magic, but it's actually a romance in a fantasy setting and dystopian. That's actually real cool. Yeah, but this is the bookmark laser engraved real
awesome.
Metal.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so this is kind of just the blank thing. So if you send me the file, I can go ahead and turn it into like a real DXF and then nice engraved. And I'll send that. I'll make like a promo video of it actually being engraved and just send it out to you. No cost, no anything like that. Just as a thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
we'll definitely have to get you on the Books by Authors podcast so you can talk just solely about yours, and that's gonna be super exciting. This was dope. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you. You know what? Let's go out on, because since you inspired me, we're gonna go out with the poem that I wrote. Right, quick little 8-sentence little thing. Right. In the night like a sentry, praying that I go gently to the gods that sent me down roads so unholy. Reef in the fifth control me, but they can never end me. So catch me with the stogie outside where my friends be.
Hey, I love it.
Because really that is Boston. That's why you made me like think about it. It was just like that whole thing of like being in college and doing all that crazy like college stuff, but then after a while you just kind of like want to like digress a little bit more and focus up on what you want to do, and just eventually the guys that control you want to start putting your things back in order. Well, definitely. Yeah, well, on that end, this is the end of the podcast. AR's Tales. Follow this man.
Yes.
Follow this man over a bridge if you need to. This book series is amazing, okay? And, I'm not saying anything like that. Obviously, we're talking about with bungees, Grow up. So this is the end of the podcast, AR's Tales. Check us out, neotino.net, official Neotino for the Twitter, Allegory of the End for the Instagram. Peace out. It's been phenomenal. We will check up on you next Monday.